Dishonored 2, the follow-up to the cult classic Dishonored 1, a game which sold significantly better than it was expected to do and also did critically really well. Even the head honchos over at ZeniMax were so surprised at how well it did when it came around to Arcane making their next game. They pretty much expected a sequel to be made right after it. And after reading a lot of developer interviews after the game released, the whole team were deeply passionate and did want to make this sequel. It wasn't a sequel for the sake of sales. But not everyone at the studio was so enthused about a sequel. Arcane Studios co-founder Rafael Colantonio, a key figurehead in the development of the first game, was actually more hesitant about working on a sequel immediately, as he wanted to step away from the world of Dishonored for a while and make something different before heading back for a sequel. It wasn't that he didn't want to make it, it was more he wanted to work on something different for the time being. And he would actually move over to Arcane Austin and work on Arcane's probably most infamous game that they have other than Dishonored, Prey. And I think that's really important to understand about Dishonored 2. While the general studio wanted to make Dishonored 2, I don't think they were actually ready to truly make Dishonored 2 and were as passionate about making the second game as they were the first game. Dishonored 1 is a true passion project from even the founders of Arcane themselves, but even those same founders were less than enthused about immediately working on the sequel. In the first game, you can see that their love is spread throughout the entire game from start to the end, from its story and how deep and layered it is, to its gameplay, in its design and the level design, art style and the themes. Everything just oozes passion within the first game. And even currently right now, the developers are playing through the first Dishonored game, talking about it, and they're showing how passionate they were about that first game. So why am I saying this? Well, sequels often run into the problem where the developers aren't as passionate, they're not as enthused, and the games often lack a certain charm. And Dishonored 2, I think many people might state that it does lack that original charm. But I actually think there's a bigger issue that Dishonored 2 had. Dishonored 2 was made in 3 years. It started development in 2013 and released in 2016. The game was made extremely quick. Dishonored 1 had a roughly 4 to 5 total year development cycle, with 1 to 2 years in early pre-production, which would establish what the game was going to be, figuring out all the systems that they needed to create, lore, world building, characters, so on and so forth. Then it had about 3 to 4 years of actual development of creating the game itself. Dishonored 2 had about 3 to 4 years, leaning more towards 3, I'm pretty sure, with 1 year being pre-production and 2 being full-scale production, which I think is a very interesting fact because the game did have quite a lot of issues at launch. Notoriously, this game came out at a time when PC ports were really struggling to get done. PC ports just seemed to be very bad, but remember, Dishonored 1 came out in 2012 and the second game came out in 2016, and in 2013 the DLCs for the first game were being made. So you'd have to assume that pre-production was going on within 2013, and then into 2014 the entire studio's main workforce moved over to it. They moved straight from Dishonored 1 and its DLCs straight into Dishonored 2, and this sort of workflow, while is very efficient, not having a change in what you're working on and having to work on the same series over and over again leads to immense burnout and can lead to a loss of talent. That is seen with one of the co-founders moving over to Austin to work on Prey because he didn't want to work on the sequel immediately. This is seen throughout the entire industry. Development studios that only work on one series, they see mass amounts of legacy talent and heavily experienced talent leave because they just don't want to work on these series anymore. They want to make something new. And I think this really does show within Dishonored 2. And I'll explain that as we go through, but I think that's enough backstory. So let's actually dive into Dishonored 2, shall we?
I remember training with my father in the years after the rat plague. Someday, he said, our enemies will come for you.
And immediately we're introduced to one of the two protagonists for Dishonored 2, Emily Caldwin.
The sounds and smells of Dunwall never change much.
The little girl from the first game, of course, the daughter of Corvo Attano. Dishonored 2, set 15 years after the first game, we take on the role of Emily, and for the time in 2016 when this game was coming out, this was actually seen as a really big surprise. Female protagonists were not that common, and Emily was actually one of the first big ones, and there was a lot of articles actually online about how this was a big thing at the time. But Emily's father, Corvo, warns her that one day her enemies will come for her, a warning of the future that is to come. But here in Dawnwell, we enter the entire tutorial section and are shown a lot of the game's basic mechanics, with our teacher here being her father, Corvo Attano, the main protagonist of Dishonored 1 and the second main protagonist of Dishonored 2. Now, I actually don't mind the dual protagonist idea. Both are voiced fairly well in my opinion. Emily by Erica Luttrell, who I actually think is really good in this game and has been in the industry on and off for a long time. She is mainly a actress, but she's sort of a lower tier voice actress. She's mainly done a lot of smaller roles, but most notably she has voiced Shuri in a couple of Marvel projects and also a character in Apex Legends. And I do like her as Emily. I think she actually does a really good job. And Corvo is voiced by Stephen Russell, a veteran of the voice world and an extremely talented voice at that, voicing Garrett in Thief the Dark Project and a number of characters in System Shock 2, Skyrim, Fallout 3, and his most recent role before this game was Codsworth and Nick Valentine in Fallout 4. He has an extensive history working with Bethesda and ZeniMax, and I do like his performance, but it does sound just a bit odd to me. And I think it's due to Corvo being a silent character in the first game, so now giving him a voice just feels odd. But the voice does suit him, but I don't think they really gave him enough to really do. I think Corvo could have been made a extremely interesting character in this game. With the voice talent they gave him, the potential is immense, but it feels almost slightly disappointing in my eyes. I don't mind the voice, but it is a bit disappointing to me. I don't mind the two character things, and I think I have a really tough time explaining why I'm not a big fan of it. I think the main problem with having two characters like this is, to me, one of them feels the correct one, and that's Emily to me. I feel like she fits the tone of the game. I feel like it makes more thematical sense as well, almost a passing of the torch to her for the franchise. But the story still does make sense for Corvo, with it being a revenge narrative about him having to save Emily. You get the point of that, but then it just feels like the same story from the first game. It's not that I don't like Corvo as a playable character. I actually do quite like him, but for me, it feels almost pointless in a way for the story. I honestly would have much preferred, I think, if they made Emily the main focus of the story and made it more personal, because I think that's something this game really does lack, which I'll explain later, is there's very little personal attachment to the story like in the first game. And for New Game Plus, they could have allowed Corvo as almost an unlockable character, or what I saw many people online say is make DLC that focuses entirely on these characters, be it either Emily as the DLC or what I think would be better, Corvo as the DLC. I don't think it's bad, and I was really trying to figure out why I felt miffed about Corvo being included. And I think it's because it just feels like it's kind of lazily done in a way. I saw some people say that Emily was only added to please what was becoming the DEI woke agenda, whatever, and make women feel like, I don't think it's that, or maybe it is. Maybe the developers did look at it this way, but I don't think that's the reason that they did it. To me, it felt like more they were focusing on the gameplay more than anything else than the story. But to me, I think Emily should represent a much bigger part of the narrative. She should be a very important character, and I think the future of the franchise lied with her, not Corvo. Corvo's story to me was already told, and rehashing the same story doesn't push the franchise further, it sidesteps it. And I think that's the biggest problem I have with Corvo in this game. I like him again, but I feel like the writing style and how he's written just feels wrong, because to me, it's not the character I imagined him to be, and it's not where I would thought the best path forward for his character would be. I don't know. I feel like this is a massive nitpick by me, but it does feel like that maybe due to how quickly the game was made, they made the story more simpler, made sure that both characters made sense within the story and could fit both in to easily add more gameplay to the game, because I'm sure porting and just recreating Corvo's abilities was a very easy thing to do, and it allowed them to focus more on creating Emily and having a more diverse playstyle with her. And of course it adds hella replayability because you get Corvo's powers if you don't play as him. I don't know, let me know. This is something I'm genuinely curious about to see what people think, because I feel like there is a problem here. From a gameplay standpoint, it makes perfect sense, but from the story perspective, to me, it feels wrong in a way, if that makes sense. I don't know. This is something I've been actually really struggling to figure out. Anyway, let's get back to it. The tutorial section is pretty basic. We learn the movement from climbing to sliding, stealth takedowns, and how to use the crossbow, and of course, sword fighting. We learn everything that the game has in terms of gameplay, and the entire gameplay side of the game is entirely improved. Movement feels amazing in this game, and I actually wish they used the movement more, like encouraging you to do parkour a lot more, because a lot of the time running around and jumping all over the place, you get spotted very easily. The swordplay feels amazing and is actually way better with parrying and blocking, just feeling better and more fun to do. The crossbow is basically the same thing. It was as good as it was in the first game, and you get a couple new types of bolts to use. But genuinely, at times, I really love this game's gameplay systems, because it reminds me of almost a mix of Dying Light's parkour system alongside Dishonored's more, I guess, stiff system. It's this really unique gameplay flow that just feels so fun to really master. But with us finishing the tutorial, we get a quick recap on the first game's plot, which is a good way to get people caught up on the first game if you didn't play it. Play the first game, because it's one of the best games ever made. But it does give us some more insight into Emily as a character. She is doubting her rule, questioning what kind of ruler her mother wanted her to be, and if she is embodying that person, being the person her mother wanted to. And I think that's a really good story theme for this game. Questioning who you are meant to be and if you are on the right path does sound really interesting and does make sense, being able to play as both Corvo and Emily. Both of them question their roles in this world. Corvo, a royal protector who failed at his job in the first game and is now being challenged again, and Emily as the current empress. It makes a lot of sense and works for both characters. But currently, they are facing a new crisis, a serial killer called the Crown Killer, who has been hunting and picking off Emily's political enemies, framing Emily and Corvo for the murders, making the kingdom unruly and ungoverned in some parts due to the chaos that has ensued because of it. And it is getting to the point where Emily is questioning who she can truly trust amongst the people she works with, and if she should have them all executed. A bit brutal, but it does show that Emily does embody both sides of what she could have become in the first game. The high chaos version where she talks about executing people constantly, and the more, I would say, patient, reserved, and thoughtful one that would be created in the low chaos version. But now we enter the throne room to join a remembrance party, or event, I guess, for Emily's mother, Jessamine, as it has been, I'm guessing, 15 years since she died?
All hail Her Imperial Majesty, Emily Caldwin.
Loyal subjects, we're going through a difficult time, but today we honor my mother, the late Jessamine Caldwin. May her memory survive through the ages.
Emily.
You look tired, Father.
Every year, I think the anniversary of Jessamine's death will be easier, but it never is.
I wish Mother was still the Empress. I don't think I'm very good at this.
You're still learning. Don't worry about the rabble-rousers, and we'll catch the Crown Killer, eventually.
People are saying it's you. That these assassinations are a misguided effort to protect me.
No, someone's trying to make us look guilty by targeting your enemies.
I wish I could just run away from all this.
Sometimes you do. You think I don't know about your nights out on the rooftops? Courage. The ceremony will be over soon.
Royal Protector and Father. I should have passed a law against that combination of titles years ago.
Majesty, before we begin the day's observances, we have an unexpected visitor, the Duke of Serkonos.
Ramsey says the Duke is bringing special gifts.
That's intriguing.
His Grace Luca Abel, Duke of Serkonos!
And the Duke of Serkonos has come to pay a visit and his respects to the late Empress.
Soldiers? Amazing.
What is this, Ramsey? I didn't authorize those things.
Your Imperial Majesty and Royal Protector Corvo Atano, a native of our homeland. Serkonos offers condolences on this sorrowful day, and gifts to remind you of our nation, the rising star on the southern horizon.
We thank you.
Holy shit, that's Vincent D'Onofrio, what? Voiced by fucking Vincent D'Onofrio, the Kingpin himself.
We thank you, Your Grace.
Save your thanks. For now, I give you the greatest gift of all, family. I present the lost sister of Jessamine Caldwin, your rightful Empress, Delilah Caldwin.
Impossible.
My mother had a sister?
My dearest niece, hello.
It's not true.
My father was Emperor Euhorn Jacob Caldwin, and Jessamine was my younger sister. At the time of her death, I wasn't ready to make myself known to you, and I was forced to leave Dunwall. But now I'm home.
If you really are my mother's sister, you're welcome to stay as long as you like.
Little Sparrow, blackened by bad memories, I'm here to relieve you of your crown. My father's promise, whispered in secret so many years ago, is now fulfilled.
Watch your tongue. Emily Caldwin is the daughter of Empress Jessamine Caldwin.
Royal Protector, how naive to think you could get away with these murders. Living in my palace has protected you, but that's over. Hear me, all of you. Your rightful Empress has returned.
All hail the Empress Delilah, first of her name. Arrest Emily Caldwin and her father for the Crown Killer murder.
What?
Sword can't still my heart.
And it's revealed that Delilah, the witch, the main antagonist of the first game's DLCs, is the older half-sister of Jessamine, with her father being the previous emperor. Now, what do I think of this opening? It's okay. It's a bit bloated, I think. I feel like there's quite a lot going on and there's not really a central reason to get engaged. We initially had the idea of Emily questioning her place as a ruler. Then we have the crown killer and all that, which I thought would have been sort of the main hook of the game. Now we have this whole thing with Delilah now taking the throne. To me, it feels like there's just too much going on, in my opinion. I like the crown killer plot point. Murders around the kingdom, which we might have to investigate and figure out what's going on, but the Empress and Corvo are being blamed for, and it could lead to them being dishonored. You know, they lose their place amongst the honored ones. It could be a really interesting plot point and could lead us into the game. And it just like, but throwing in Delilah, I think kind of ruins it, and I won't spoil it why I think that, but I just don't think she really works as the main villain for this game, mainly because I just feel like there's too much going on. I don't mind Delilah, I do like her, but I feel like as a character, she's kind of almost forced her way into this scenario, which is intended, but I feel like even the writers didn't really have a good way to naturally get her to this point. Well, it makes sense why Delilah's here, story-wise, but I just feel like there's so much going on that her just coming out of nowhere when in the previous game, in the DLCs, you could kill her, trap her, whatever. It just feels very sudden. The game does explain how she escaped being trapped, but to me, it just feels like there's 6 different things coming in from all different angles that are trying to like hook the game and start the story. That to me, it feels almost too much. And just, it feels very odd, and it just feels like a lot's going on. And also, I think from a thematic point, for this game, having it be Delilah for me doesn't really work. I actually think if the Duke himself took the throne, it would have made way more sense thematically, because you could tie it into the point I made last video about Jessamine being a female ruler and female leaders and rulers always being looked down upon and seen as weak. You could have gone for that whole story, would have tied very well into the first game. That was a theme that was present in Dishonored 1, and it was focused on a lot, how women were seen and treated in older societies like this. Remember, this is only 15 years after the first game. We're not 100 years or like, you know, modern day. We're still in an older society, and in a society where like the old class system exists, where gender roles existed and everything. We're still in that. And I think having, again, the Duke of Serkonos fulfill this role of taking the throne would make more sense, in my eyes, for the story, especially with Emily as the main character. But having Delilah here come and take the throne shifts the focus away from that potential theme that could link to the first game, and I think would actually make for a far more interesting narrative, to now it shifting and being entirely focused on the family angle. Delilah states that, of course, Jessamine is her half-sister and that she was wronged by the royal family. She was abandoned by her father, and it makes you question what happened. But also, is it bad that I just didn't want the main antagonist require you to play the DLCs for the first game to actually understand what the fuck's going on? If you just played Dishonored 1 and you didn't touch the DLCs, I know people will say the DLCs are the best part. I agree, they are really good, but you have to know that people will play Dishonored 1 and then they won't touch the DLCs. Like, some people will play the game when it came out and they won't return for the DLC. Not everyone does play the DLCs because they don't feel as encouraged to go back to them. So I think having Delilah, a lot of the story that you need to know from those DLCs is just not even mentioned really, and you miss a lot of that character building and the backstory of who she is from those DLCs, and I think that's really important to do. I mean, I was surprised that they even brought her back for this game, to be honest, because again, you can kill her in the first game's DLCs, which means that it canonizes a certain route within those DLCs and the first game. That's going to be a big problem with this game that you'll quickly find out. The game has a canon route. The ending where Emily dies cannot be canon now because she's fucking alive here. That means certain actions you take in the first game all have canon outcomes. But here we now get to choose between playing as Corvo or Emily, and this choice changes a hell of a lot for your first playthrough, which I was actually incredibly surprised about. Each character has slightly different dialogue, of course, but the most important changes is to gameplay. One character is focused more on lethality and killing, and the other more on non-lethal methods and distractions. Corvo plays exactly the same as he did in the first game. He has all the same abilities and everything. But Emily, once she obtains her mark, gets entirely new powers, which act very different, and I love this change. I initially thought, when I was playing as Emily, that all the powers had been changed and replaced with new ones. I thought this because Corvo had his mark removed, so I thought when he got his powers back, they would be the new powers, not that he would just get his old powers back again. Very weird to think about that the outsider would give his powers back like 12 minutes later. Bit weird that, innit? But of course, upon entering New Game Plus, I saw that all of Corvo's powers return. And then I realized and figured out that if you played as Corvo, you got his powers in the first playthrough. And I wish the game actually told you this in-game and you didn't need to look it up or watch the trailer to learn this. Because depending on which character you pick, the entire game plays differently because their playstyle and their powers encourage very different styles of gameplay. One having powers that are more focused on being lethal and being able to cause a little bit of chaos, and the other being more attuned to stealth. If you want my recommendation personally, if you've played Dishonored 1, play Emily first. If you haven't played the first game, you can maybe pick Corvo. If you want something that's more action orientated, go with Corvo. If you want something more stealth orientated, go with Emily. And my biggest praise for Dishonored 2 entirely lies within Emily. Not only as a character, because I actually really do like her as a character, but she is exactly what I wanted in the first game. A big complaint I made in the first video was I felt that true, proper stealth, non-lethal stealth, you did not have enough kit to play around with to make it engaging. Got to the point where the game was getting boring and you relied too much on choking enemies out or using sleep darts. But Emily's kit is completely designed around making non-lethal stealth way more engaging and way more fun. She has significantly more options to deal with enemies non-lethal, which makes doing a low chaos run with her actually fun and not laborious or tedious like it was in the first game. It's just as fun as going high chaos. We'll go over the powers a bit later as we actually get powers, but for context, I chose to play as Emily as my first character to play through the game. And this leads to Corvo being trapped in stone by Delilah and flipped if you chose Corvo with Emily being trapped.
Sweet girl, over time you will come to love me. Perhaps someday you'll see me as the mother you lost. But until then, you'll be kept out of trouble.
I'll lock Lady Emily in her chambers, and I'll bring her to Coldwood Prison until her trial.
By the way, that man there, Mortimer Ramsey, is played by Sam Rockwell, another big actor. With us being knocked out, we get to hear his complaints about not being able to do what rich people like doing.
My father lost it all when I was a boy, so now I wear this uniform, and I send 20-year-olds out to patrol the rose gardens instead of drinking with the men from the shooting club.
Playing golf, sleeping around with women, and then calling the women whores, I guess.
Captain Ramsey, I heard shouting. Lady Emily, what happened?
I'll be all Captain Mayhew.
But he kills Captain Mayhew, the woman that handed us our signet ring, and she is also voiced by a big actress.
And half. There's a legend in the Tower Guard about the Empress's last resort, a safe room inside your chambers holding enough gold to buy a good-sized island. They say that this ring is one of the only 2 keys to exist.
With Mortimer locking us within a room and taking our signet ring away, we have to find a way to sneak out of the room and retrieve the signet ring. But escaping the room, we find the coup has turned deadly very quickly, and we can find our friend Alexei on the floor.
Where's the Royal Protector?
There's a coup underway. My father he's imprisoned, for lack of a better word.
You've got to get out of the tower. Through your safe room. There was a captain earlier today down at the docks, looking for the Royal Protector. Find her. Get out of Dunwall.
Alexei, I'm sorry. Goodbye.
Well, she is dead, but a note next to her is a message for the Royal Protector, which is urgent and that needs to be delivered face to face. Tell him that the person writing this note is working with Sokolov, signed off by a Megan Foster. So we need to make our way to the ship named the Dreadful Whale. But first we need to grab our signet ring to get out. So sneaking our way through the palace, we quickly can find Mortimer, knock him out or kill him, and retrieve the ring. And with it, we can now open up the safe room and place Mortimer inside to ensure that he isn't killed, or again, just kill him. And here we can retrieve a small amount of money, but more importantly, our gun and spyglass, now allowing us to zoom in to get a better view of things and shoot shit. But with us now being fully equipped, we can exit the safe room, locking Mortimer inside, effectively imprisoning him until we get back. But now we have to escape Dunwall, and I really like this section of the mission. Dunwall itself is really well made for this game, and it embodies the entirety of what Dunwall was in the first game. But not only that, it has an insane level of verticality to it. And my one complaint is that we just don't get to spend a lot of time here. It's a really cool level, but you feel almost forced to rush through it because you're being chased by all the fucking guards in the Empire. But sneaking our way through, we can hear that the guards have all flipped, now entirely choosing Delilah as their new Empress. It is a bit weird, but I guess the threat of execution by higher-ups is enough to get people to flip on anyone. But escaping all of the guards, we actually can reach the boat, the Dreadful Whale, and speak to its captain.
Lady, you want to hear what I've got to say. I guarantee it. Lady Emily, you won't get far with that face. Stamped on half the coins in the city.
There's a coup underway, and I'm being blamed for the Crown Killer murders. I don't care what my face looks like.
My name's Megan Foster. I work with an old ally of yours, Anton Sokolov. We learned something scary down in the south, and I came to warn you.
I know, Anton, but Corvo's gone. The Duke of Serkonos is here with a woman named Delilah. They massacred everyone in the throne room. Then she did something I can't explain. There was nothing to do but run.
Sometimes that's all you can do. This is my ship, the Dreadful Whale. We can head out as soon as you're ready.
I need to get to Karnaca where the Crown Killer murders started. Delilah must have been down there for a while, and I've got to figure out what's going on.
You're Corvo's daughter. I'll give you that. Should we go?
And now we head out away from Dunwall, and on our trip we are paid a visit by the outsider.
Empress Emily Caldwin. I am a friend of your father's from the bad old days. I never expected us to meet. I watched your mother die at the hands of schemers who wanted your little empire. Then you were rescued by a man in a strange mask. I thought that was the end of the excitement. But someone yanked the rug from under your feet. You've lost your throne and your father. And I promise, Delilah won't just give them back. So, what are you prepared to do about it? Your Imperial Majesty? And are you clever enough to do it without spilling a river of blood? I asked Corvo those questions 15 years ago. This is the moment that changed him. Now it's your turn.
It burns from the inside. I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something. All the stories, they're true.
And we get the choice of taking or not taking the Outsider's mark. Take the mark, you get powers. Not taking it, you get no powers whatsoever, and it's basically a challenge mode for the game. But we quickly get a tutorial on the basic movement power, be it Blink for Corvo or Far Reach for Emily. But we also receive the heart again.
Know you. Do you remember?
A big change in Dishonored 2 is now it's very obvious the heart belongs to Jessamine, and I think that's kind of an issue I have with Dishonored 2. The game straight up tells you this and quite a few other things. Leaving mystery in a game and a story does make it more interesting, and is what made Dishonored 1 more interesting. That level of mystery and guessing that you had to do to figure stuff out. But this game kind of removes all that mystery and just straight up tells us that the heart is Jessamine. It's her soul, spirit, whatever. But again, the heart can be used to tell us the lore about certain areas, tell us about characters and their backstory and everything. And it is, again, a cool feature that I do really like, if less emphasized a bit. But in this dream, we can see Delilah and all of her cronies, and we can also receive our first rune.
There's no one quite like Delilah. I watched her pull herself up from blood and filth, until she was in a position to steal from the wisest scholars in the Empire. Survival and ambition, art and magic, with a cunning that makes fawning sycophants of those around her, all of it leading to what you saw at Dunwall Tower. Delilah's playing the long game. She took all the abuse the world could deal out, and now she has a crown. But I'll let you in on a secret. She's got her eyes set on a much greater prize.
A bit of advice for us that Delilah is after something else that isn't just the throne. She wants something as well. But now we head out of Dunwall and are introduced to our key location for the majority of Dishonored 2. Karnaca, the capital city of Serkonos. And Karnaca is a city by the ocean that smells like strange spices and sea air. While Dunwall is very heavily inspired by London and a couple of other UK cities, Karnaca is mainly inspired by Mediterranean European countries. Countries like southern Italy, Spain, Portugal, but its main inspiration is Larnaca, a city in Cyprus. Now, of course, the game does take place in Dunwall for a little bit, but what do I think of this new key location? For argument's sake, the city of Karnaca and the area of Serkonos are the main location for Dishonored 2. So what do I think of them? If I can be honest, I'm not too big on it. I think the first few levels do a good job of showing the theming of what this city is. The bright, almost dreamlike Mediterranean city that feels like you're on a Greek holiday is nice. The game is genuinely beautiful looking with such a unique art style that they have developed a lot. But I will be honest, Dunwall and the look of the first game just kind of tickled me in a way that I love. The grunginess, the dirtiness, and that oppressive feeling of the atmosphere and everything, it just gave this game this heavy feeling that constantly felt like society was on the verge of collapse and everything was being just weighed upon you. And I praised endlessly Dishonored 1 for this. Its location and how it makes Dunwall its own character, how it used real history and modified that and applied it to its setting. The plague obviously reflected things like the Black Plague and the Victorian era disease outbreaks that were very common in them workplaces, but also tied into things like class inequality, worker exploitation, overcrowding, the wealth inequality that still plagues England to this day. Dunwall basically feels like a twisted version of industrial London, and I wanted to make that very clear in the first video. And it makes that world feel very believable, but also very lived in as well. It feels like a real society with real historical events and things happening within it and behind it. But with Dishonored 2, I never really felt the same thing with Karnaca. It kind of does do that, but nowhere near at the same level. Dunwall very clearly represents London in Victorian England, while Karnaca feels like a blend of 20 different countries, cities, and cultures all mashed together. You do see a lot of influences, mainly from Spain, Italy, Greece, but it pulls from a lot, and to me, it almost pulls from too much that it loses a central identity. They do mention in the game that the city and the area have a very rich history of silver mining, trade, immigration, and a big economic divide. And this very much reminds me of Spain, Portugal, who early on had a big trade industry, especially around the Industrial Revolution. That's why there was a lot of Spanish and Portuguese settlers that moved over to other countries like Southern American countries and North American countries. And it does have some interesting history, and I do think it is an interesting location, but I think it just lacks that central thing. To me, it feels more that the aesthetic was focused on than the thematic side of it. Dunwall fully focused on the theming and the thematic creation of a Victorian era style city, while Karnaca feels like it wants to focus entirely on that dreamlike Mediterranean city, not really diving into the history. Personally, I would have loved if they fully committed to one specific historical influence and really tied Karnaca and Serkonos into the politics and culture of that place. Honestly, I think tying it heavily into Spain's specific industrial revolution would have been actually a way cooler idea. Spain, most interestingly, industrialized way slower than other parts of Europe, and I think you could have had this really big uneven economic growth shown within the game, which naturally obviously would lead into themes of wealth inequality and dependence on outside powers. Hell, Spain in real life really struggled with access to high quality coal early on to help fuel the industrial revolution in their country. You've got an instant replacement there with fucking whale oil. You could make it so whale oil becomes the backbone of Karnaca's economy. They are completely reliant on it, but it is an import from, say, Dunwall or another country. And this could lead into why someone like the Duke of Serkonos so easily sided with Delilah. He wants to take more control of the kingdom to help push his own specific home higher up, not being completely reliant on the kindness of Dunwall. This to me gives it way more political meaning and weight that the first game had a lot of, but the second game lacks entirely. This to me would allow the world to be built up in such a cool way and actually dive into a very different topic.
I want to expand on my point. I've just thought about it a bit more, and I really do like this idea, and I want to fully explain it. In the Dust District level later in the game, Sokolov himself kind of puts the idea towards Emily that where does she think all the things that she lives with in luxury, where do they come from? I think this theme could have been so good to have Emily go out and be forced to see less than fortunate people that are forced to work in really hard conditions for very little money, And most of the time they're being exploited and used by richer people so they can live in luxury, people like herself. I think this has been a really interesting narrative to dive into and really make her reflect on the kind of ruler she is being. I genuinely think Dishonored 2's story had such insane potential to tell something so different and impactful for Emily. This is kind of what the first game had. It had a central theme of Corvo falling from where he was dishonored, and he had to find a way back, and he had to think about the actions he was doing and how it would impact society. Now we are a ruler, an empress, or maybe you're the royal protector again, but the empress feels right here, and she's acting, she's seeing another part of the empire, and she's seeing that they aren't as fortunate as her, and she questions her actions. I think this is a great setup, and I think would make the game feel more impactful and give it a central identity. I also think it would help to distinguish it more from the first game. Again, this will dive into a lot of the same topics and themes and messages that the first game did as well, but at least it gives it something more unique to look into, a different way of looking at the same themes, which I think is what Dishonored 2 really needed. But not only that, I think Dishonored 2 needed its own identity and everything, and a lot of the things that have returned from Dishonored 1 don't help that. But we'll get onto that later, especially towards the end of the game. Unfortunately, the second game just dives into a lot of the same topics of the first game. So to me, the cultural identity of Psychonos and Karnaca feels so much weaker than Dunwall. Dunwall has its own culture and everything. Fuck, you even had the pub and everything, which I praised, but this game doesn't have that, which I think is a massive shame. I'm not saying I hate the location, I actually do like it. I think visually it looks amazing, but my main complaint is that it just doesn't do what Dishonored 1 did with Dunwall. It doesn't do what it did so well. It just doesn't really do it. Dishonored 1 made a big focus of its story and what was happening in the game's story, things that were happening within the city. The rat plague completely influenced what was happening. We heard that Dunwall was being cut off from the other cities in the kingdom because they were scared of the plague spreading, and this one thing influenced the entire story. It was an event happening in the city that spread and affected everything. It was a cool narrative point that made you feel like it was more desperate. And Dishonored 2 doesn't really do that. We never see events in the world affect the main story that we're following. Even this game's version of the rats, the plague thing, the blood flies, which could have been a really cool idea, but the thing is, they never really feel anywhere near as important to the story as the rats were in the first game. Anyway, let's carry on, shall we, for the first mission. And for that mission, before we head off on it, we retrieve the crossbow, which again works like the first game. You point it and shoot it, and it does whatever the bolt loaded does: kill, sleep, blind, scare, or set on fire. But with this now, we head to meet Megan, talk about the first target and our first mission.
All right, you've explained part of it, but what were you and Sokolov doing here?
The old man loved Karnaca, but he'd caught wind of a conspiracy tied to the Crown Killer. He wanted to warn Corvo.
There were reports about tensions rising, corruption, street violence. I didn't give it much mind. Usually the local authorities resolve that sort of thing.
The new Duke has let things slide, but Sokolov concluded he might be the head of the conspiracy. He came in looking shocked, and if you've heard his after-dinner stories, you know that's unusual. We were going to set out for Dunwall, but something happened.
The Crown Killer.
Yes, the hatch ripped open and Sokolov screamed. All I caught was a glimpse of someone carrying him across the deck. I followed as long as I could, toward Addermeyer Institute. It's run by the alchemist Hypatia. Maybe the Duke is using a patient of hers, the Crown Killer.
Addermeyer. All right, I'll get inside. The Crown Killer has to be eliminated, and if the alchemist will cooperate, maybe I can learn something about what happened to Sokolov. Wish me luck.
If you need my luck, Sokolov's as good as dead. When you get done at the Institute, disable the watchtower. Once it's down, I'll bring the boat around.
Well, it appears that Sokolov knew of a conspiracy associated with the Crown Killer and wanted to warn Corvo and Emily about it, but before he could do that, something happened. Sokolov was taken by the Crown Killer, the central figure which opened the game. So now we are headed to Adamire to find an alchemist called Hypatia, who might have information on who the Crown Killer is, as it might be one of her patients. So we head to this institute to open the first true mission of the game, and Megan will act as our Samuel, our boatman or boatwoman for this game. And we start mission 2, Edge of the World.
I'd take you to Adamire by boat, but security's too tight. The Grand Guard have a watchtower there. Go inland and use the carriage station. Before his death, the old Duke of Serkono spent decades building up Karnaca. After Duke Luca Abel took over, he started draining the wealth out of the city as fast as he could. Orgies and week-long feasts.
Having more fun here than we were in Dunwall, it seems.
Watch yourself on the way to Adamire. The Duke's given the Grand Guard run of the city. Strangers get attacked on sight.
I'll keep my head down.
This is a good spot. Reach Adamire, take out the Crown Killer, and find out where Sokolov was taken. The alchemist, Hypatia. She'll help if she can. Sokolov likes her.
I'll see you later at Adamire. Just wait to bring up the boat until after I've disabled the watchtower.
So we now dock in Karnaca, having to make our way to Adamire, and Megan does tell us that the Duke has drained the city of all of its money and that he has given the city guard free rein to attack anyone they want on site, giving us a warning about not being too lax around the guards. And I really like this first opening area, as we can very clearly see the culture of this place all over the place. Seeing whales being processed, talks about the mines and its dust not reaching this area, so we do know that the mines have a big impact on the physical life of people with its dust. And we can also find a building infested with the blood flies that I mentioned, which will be our first introduction to them. But also we can find a black market shop, the location where we can buy upgrades and equipment. I do like this opening area. I do think it does a good job of introducing us to this location, and this is as good as it gets in my opinion. It does show a very different culture and does show industry for this city, and I wish we just saw more of it. Now, what about the shop? What do I think of the shop, specifically the black market shop? Well, the shop itself is greatly expanded, and a lot of complaints I had about the first game shop have all basically been rectified in Dishonored 2, with way more upgrades being available, which would not only help general combat, but also stealth in some ways, but also money feels a hell of a lot more valuable in this game. In the first game, it felt like you would get too much money. In this game, you will always find yourself just not having enough money to get the upgrades you want. Each mission, of course, has a certain amount of money within it, but you can basically buy almost every upgrade at the beginning of the game, except a few key ones. So that means that you can spend a shit ton of money immediately, meaning you won't be able to get enough money within the level to buy everything. And I really like that because it has these moments where you'll look at two things and you'll have to debate about which one you want to buy now and which one you want to save for later. I love the new shop. It's simple, but having more blueprints and types of equipment makes it more fun to engage with, and not what it became in the first game, which to me was buy every upgrade and refill all of the stuff that you used in the previous mission and then you take into the next one. Because it doesn't become a shop at that point, it just becomes a task you do. You just press the buttons and buy everything you need. You don't actually browse, you don't look, and you don't think about what you're buying. Also, Piero, the in-between mission vendor that was in the first game, doesn't exist in Dishonored 2. There is no one actually to replace him, but that's because there is a vendor within each mission, and I actually do like this change because it again encourages you to explore the mission more, and it does make it more worth actually going out of your way to try find the vendor, because you might find yourself running out of equipment if you missed the vendor in one certain mission. Also, you can rob all of them for a nice stack of cash. If you don't want to buy any of this stuff that's in the window, like the runes and the health and stuff, you can actually just rob the place and take everything. Slight problem with this, if you do this, you might get ambushed in future shops by certain people. Almost all of the gameplay features in this game are balanced perfectly. And now I guess we should talk about the other thing that obtained at this point, that being powers.
At this point, we would already have attained the basic movement power for character, be it Blink for Corvo or Far Reach, which can allow for some really cool movement tech, as this, unlike Blink, flings you over to your target, allowing you to strafe around the map. But what about all these other powers and their upgrades? Well, there is a shit ton, and I like a lot of them. Now, I'm not going to be able to go over them all in detail, but I'm going to mention some of the ones that I really like. Starting first of all with Corvo. He retains all of his original powers: Bend Time, Dark Vision, Devouring Swarm, Possession, and Wind Blast. And each of these all have their own upgrades, some of them the same from the first game, but some new changes as well, some in very small or massive ways, such as Shockwave for Wind Blast, which creates a shockwave around Corvo when he uses it, making it more useful in a pinch, or Rat Piper in Twin Swarms for our rats, to give the rats more to do, be it follow you around the map and not just wander aimlessly, or be 2 whole rat armies at once. Pretty much Corvo has the exact same kit, but a lot of his upgrades make his kit more aggressive and more deadly than the first game, which is actually a great change as it encourages you to play more within certain chaos levels with certain powers, as Corvo's powers are more aggressive, so obviously you're going to be encouraged to play more aggressively, i.e. in high chaos. But the more interesting part of Dishonored 2, in my opinion, lies within Emily. Emily has a completely different set of powers compared to Corvo. While Emily's powers are similar, they are tweaked and work differently, and they give a completely different playstyle. First up, my favorite ability in the entire game, Domino, allows you to link up to 4 enemies, and whatever you do to one happens to all of them. Blow one up, the other 3 go bang. Knock one out with a sleep dart, all 4 of them go night-night. This is an ability that can be as simple or as powerful and complex as you can make it. With a bit of thinking and planning, it can be one of the most satisfying stealth options that you have available to you, or one of the most brutal ways to kill multiple enemies. Even in the heat of battle, being able to link multiple enemies at once and then just kill one of them is very satisfying. And to me, this single ability on its own fixed my complaint that I had with non-lethal stealth in the first game. A lot of your tools, sleep darts and stun mines, are limited, so having an ability which makes them more effective and more fun to use, because using one and you knock out 4 is very satisfying, fixes a lot of those issues. And the main issue I had in Dishonored 1 was you couldn't really do a lot of different things with these items, but having a power which directly interacts with them makes it more fun and more enjoyable to tinker with. But alongside this, we have Doppelganger, which gives you an ability that can spawn a version of yourself that can either aggro enemies onto it, or it can be upgraded to fight alongside you and even assassinate enemies for you, making it a very interesting tool that can be used as either a distraction or a reinforcement. Then there is Mesmerize, which is just straight up a distraction that enthralls humans and dogs, allowing you to slip by them even if you are directly in front of their line of sight. It's a very useful tool for stealth, for distracting patrolling guards, or even in combat for getting enemies off of you for a couple of seconds. And then there's Shadow Walk, which can be used to move around more sneakily and also through rat tunnels when upgraded. A useful tool, but in my opinion the most simple one. It's just basically a form you can take that allows you to sneak around more easily. And while on your first playthrough you only get access to your specific character's powers, on New Game Plus you get access to both sets of powers. And man, this game is fun as shit to tinker with within New Game Plus. Experimenting with how all the different abilities interact with each other is amazing, and being able to pick and choose between all of these powers on a New Game Plus run is, again, extremely fun and makes it very enjoyable to replay over and over again. If Dishonored 1 was somewhat of an immersive sim, Dishonored 2 is a true immersive sim. But of course, alongside those powers, we have enhancements. Some are the same from the first game, like Vitality for increasing health, Shadow Kill for causing bodies to disappear once killed, but there are some new ones as well, like Reflexes, which bolsters your defense against ranged attacks, allowing you to deflect bullets if timed right. And for one of my favorite parts of this game, one of the enhancements is Bone Charm crafting, which unlocks the Bone Charm crafting system. Bone Charms in Dishonored 2 have been enhanced significantly, with not only more effects, but more types of charms as well, from the standard
to Black, and even Corrupted, which returned from the first game's DLC. Basic give a basic effect, Corrupted give you a more powerful effect but have some kind of drawback, and Black Bone Charms have a very unique trait or a very powerful one akin to a Corrupted Bone Charm, and they have no drawback whatsoever. And these are the rarest one, often with there only being one within each level or each sub-level of each mission. And the best part about the new Bone Charm system is the crafting part of it. Dismantling basic charms allows you to learn their trait. Corrupted and Black ones, you can't learn their traits that they have associated with them, but dismantling them yields you a lot of whale bone to use within crafting. And once you upgrade your abilities to craft bone charms with runes, you can actually make one bone charm that has 4 effects on it, and one upgrade allows you to stack multiple of the same effect, allowing you to stack 4 of the same ability on itself, allowing you to make some really fun builds within the game, allowing you to run around really quickly while crouched or have your mana regen extremely quickly. The Bone Charm crafting system is so good, and it allows you to make a build and push these little bonuses to make them a major bonus, completely changing the gameplay for you yourself, and can completely change how the game plays entirely. From a game design standpoint, Dishonored 2 is just upgrades in every part of its systems, from weapons and powers to the Bone Charm system. It's all a masterclass, and it fully puts the powers in your hands to choose what upgrades and powers you want and what benefits that you want to get from these charms. It entirely gives the power to you and allows you to choose. From a gameplay standpoint, Dishonored 2 is a perfect follow-up. It improves everything about the first game. Every complaint I personally have about the first game is fixed in terms of its gameplay. But I hear you asking, what about the levels themselves? Has the level design been improved, or does it match the first games? Edge of the World opens with us basically being set free and told to find a way to the Adamaya Institute, and we can achieve this objective in a multitude of ways. It's up to you to figure out how to get there. And man, these levels are filled with so much to see and explore and interact with. From the black market shop, which you can buy or rob, small side objectives which can grant a boatload of cash and resources like the aforementioned bloodfly nests, or even scripted quests like the one here with Mindy Blanchard, with her asking us to retrieve a body for her, and in exchange she will help us out. But our first true objective in this game is to bypass a wall of light, and this is what the first game did, and I think this game actually does the first objective way better. This game actually does encourage you to explore a lot more, and there isn't an obvious path over it. And it's good that the game does this, as it's teaching and rewarding the player for thinking, experimenting, and exploring, which is the core of an immersive sim and was the core of Dishonored 1's gameplay loop. But upon doing so, you will reach the Canal Square, and here we can find the first shrine to the Outsider. And like the last game, each one of these you'll find, he will have a little chinwag with us.
Karnaca was a lovely city once, before the Duke began choking the life out of the place, before the Crown Killer started painting the walls red. Now you're here, and I have to wonder whether you're gonna give it that final nudge, or pull it back from the edge. We've both seen cities go bad before. Vermin, blood, and betrayal. It's happening again. I hope you're ready.
The Outsider reinforces the fact that Karnaca was once a lovely place until the Duke started to squeeze the lemon for all of its juice, and alongside the Crown Killer, it is bordering on collapse, and he questions whether we will be the straw that breaks the proverbial camel's back. And this is trying to do what Dishonored 1 does really well, which is make you think about your actions and your current chaos level. But the difference is that we can't really see that being reflected in the game. We don't see what our actions are actually impacting. Yes, having differences occur between high and low chaos within levels is good, but unfortunately, if you're playing through the game, you won't know that these are differences. Dishonored 1 knew this, and they had something in place to make sure that you were reflecting on it. Dishonored 1 had Emily. Her personality and what she was drawing would completely change depending on your current chaos level. Either being an innocent young girl who is a child and acts like one in the low chaos version, or turning more ruthless, talking about executions and seeing Corvo, her father, not as her father, but as the ruthless assassin with that mask.
Dishonored 2 doesn't have this. There isn't really a moment which makes you question your actions like Dishonored 1 has. And I really think the game does try to make you think about your actions, but there isn't that central character within the game that makes you care about your actions as much. Kids in games have been used a lot to do this in stories. They use them to make the player think about the effect of their actions. The Last of Us had Ellie, and that was a central theme of that game. But also in one of my favorite games, Telltale's The Walking Dead, seeing Clementine repeat an action or a word that you used earlier in the game really did make you think and made you reconsider how you were acting and portraying yourself to her, because you wanted to make sure that she was growing up into a good person, that she would be strong enough to take care of herself. And it's really interesting to see this issue come up within Dishonored 2, because the same issue came up within Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 2. That game's entire main core and heart was around that relationship between Lee and Clementine. Dishonored 1, of course, the relationship between Corvo and Emily isn't anywhere near as important, but I do still think it was a very important thing for the game's story and themes and actually making you reflect on your actions. It was still important, but not entirely for the game to function correctly. Like, if Clementine was removed from Telltale's The Walking Dead, the game wouldn't be the same. But if you remove Emily from the first game, it could still work, but maybe not as well. But it is interesting to see this issue come up again, because you're removing a key aspect from the first game that was fairly important to actually build up this sort of question that we had, questioning our own actions. And when we move to the second game, you still want players to question it. You don't have someone there to keep pushing that question towards us. There is no Emily replacement. Emily here in this game doesn't have an offspring. She doesn't have a son or a daughter. There isn't some young kid that we take in. There's nothing like that. And that was another thing that, say, Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 2 had a big issue with. That relationship that Lee and Clementine had was gone, so there wasn't that strong narrative point anymore and engagement from the player to really think about what you were doing. The game itself loses that personal story that is personal not to the characters but to the player, and I think that's really important. But moving on from that, moving on from the outsider and looting everything that we can reach a cart and then make our way to the Institute and begin our search for Hypatia. And man, going from the port area to this like medical facility is actually really cool. And this is one of Dishonored 2's biggest strengths, the level variety. The amount of different types of locations that we will visit, from medical facilities to mansions to districts that are like dirt poor, and then having these like next to each other in the level, so you go from the streets of Karnaca to now medical institution, is really cool because it all feels like it's a part of the same world, because you're going from a station to here and it just flows very well. I do have a slight issue though with this, and that is a lot of the levels do feel very disconnected in ways. The streets of Karnaca, most of the opening parts of each of the levels all feel connected, but these central parts, the main parts of each of the levels, feel very disconnected. They're all very different, they look very different, they feel very different, and they all have main central gimmicks around them that give them their identity. But I'll explain that a bit once we get to one of the levels I think is the most egregious for this issue. But each of the levels do focus on some form of central gimmick. Now, this is the first mission, or second mission technically, I guess, and it doesn't really have a core gimmick, but it's the first mission that really gives you freedom. So it's more just allowing you to learn the game and its systems, but also familiarize yourself with searching for clues and notes, listening to dialogue from guards, waiting for guard patrols to move, to give openings, stealth, action, everything. It teaches you everything the game has to offer. There isn't really like a big obstacle you have to overcome. It's very basic obstacles, and it's simple. Exploring it more and in depth, you are rewarded handsomely, of course, with a bunch of money, charms, runes, so on and so forth. But we'll focus on the main objective. Making our way to Hypatia's office, we can ransack it for information on Sokolov's whereabouts, but eventually we will find our way to another outsider shrine.
I so enjoy watching history warp as words pass from the lips of one to the ears of another. Imperfectly formed, half understood, poorly remembered. In the years to come, the story of the Crown Killer will be twisted and bent, hammered like soft metal. By some accounts, a monster that had to be put down. By others, a victim of treachery. Preserved, because in the end, you found another way. But you'll always remember the truth, won't you? Your truth, at least.
The Outsider talks about the Crown Killer and how in future years the Crown Killer will be seen in one of two ways depending on what we do. They were a killer who had to be put down, or someone who desperately needed help and was forced to do what they were doing. They were forced to live this life of murder. They never actually intended to harm anyone. So it seems that the Crown Killer might have some form of mental problem, not being able to actually control themselves. And maybe that's where this game is going to dive into, mental health issues and how in older societies like the post-industrial revolution, they weren't treated as seriously. They weren't even recognized as a real thing. And that could be a really interesting thing to dive into, especially now we're talking around World War I time. You could really dive into that topic and really look at that theme. Unfortunately, despite the game is sort of treading that theme, it doesn't actually really dive into it. It never fully commits to it, and I think that's a massive shame. You don't really get the golden cat moment where you hear the girls talking about hating their job and wishing that they could be free. You don't get that. You don't have any patients here who are talking and wishing that they could be let go or actually be listened to and helped for what's actually wrong with them. You don't get any of that. Every person in this building is a guard that you have to kill or knock out. So we don't really get to do any of that cool stuff of talking about this interesting theme, but within Hypatia's office, we don't actually find anything. So now we head over to actually meet Hypatia herself.
Are you a patient of mine? I'm sorry. I should know that.
I'm here to ask you about something.
Do you cover your face because you were hurt? The afflictions we treat here are more common than anyone likes to admit.
I'm not here for treatment. I'm looking for Anton Sokolov.
Sokolov? Yes, he was here for a short time, but she took him away to see Kirin Jindosh. Do you hear something?
What about the Crown Killer? The patient of yours?
The Crown Killer? That name came from the newspapers. I'm afraid I don't... Oh yes, the murders. I was in Dunwall, studying diseases found among whaling crews. Wait, did someone just call me? I've been forgetting things. The Crown Killer is an interesting case. I feel almost sure I could help with that. It's just, I used to do such good work and now my memory is failing me. Who is that calling me? Excuse me.
She seems like a little bit out of it, doesn't she? She seems like she's a bit confused about what is actually happening, and she seemingly keeps hearing someone call her name. And for me, personally, I thought I was going crazy because I thought I recognized her voice. She is voiced by Jessica Strauss, who has a long voice acting history. She's actually one of the most experienced voice actors in this game, because most of them are like big A-list actors who don't have a lot of experience doing voice acting other than the guy that voiced fucking Ghostface, but he's an OG. She's one of the more experienced ones here, and if you don't know who she is, she's mainly known for voicing Juri in Street Fighter. She's basically always voiced her. But the voice that I personally know her for is voicing Saki Kanishi in Persona 4. I hate how my brain always picks out Persona characters. Every game, if I hear them, I will know it. It's like a fucking, issue now. She's a great actress though, and I do actually like her in this game. She does a fairly good job, even though she doesn't actually get a lot of lines or anything to do. But inside one of the side offices in this room, we can find a recording from the Duke who talks about the Crown Killer coming out to assist the Duke in something. And then when we head back into this room, we can find a body of a guy who's still alive.
Are you all right?
Dr. Hypatia did this. She's the Crown Killer. But she's not herself. She developed a serum trying to help the miners. The first version caused horrible changes to her mind. It's too late for me. But maybe you can still save her. She's a good person.
What can I do?
In my safe, in disease treatment, you'll figure out how to make the counter serum help her. The safe code is 183.
always wondered what your flesh tastes like, my dear assistant.
Well, seems there is something very clearly wrong with Hypatia. What turned her into the crown killer here? Well, she developed some sort of serum for miners. No, not that kind. But a serum that was meant to be used to give them energy, keep them focused, and allow them to work longer. But instead, it led to a massive change occurring within her, turning her into the crown killer. So it might bring up the question, should we kill Hypatia? Should we kill the crown killer if she can't actually control herself? Well, if you don't want to kill her, you can follow the instructions of the man that was just killed by locating his journal, or someone else's journal, Vasco's journal. Inside, it tells us of a way to actually create an anti-serum to save her. So following the instructions, we can make our way through the facility to collect all the ingredients and then create the cure and then inject the counter serum into Hypatia. And we actually rescue the target. You couldn't do that at all for the first game.
No, no, no. Not back to sleep. I won't go. I won't give it back.
Dr. Hypatia?
Yes. I'm sorry. Something's not right with me. Maybe I contracted something working with infectious samples.
No. Someone was poisoning you. But you should be better now. I found some alchemical notes and made a counter serum.
Poisoning me?
Don't worry. I'm gonna take care of it. If you need a place to lay low for a few days, come find us. I'm staying with an ally on a boat called the Dreadful Whale.
And now she returns to her old self, and we invite her to join us on the Dreadful Whale to help us in locating and saving Sokolov, as we have learned where he is being held from some notes earlier found within the level. But now disabling the watchtower, we can escape to Megan and finish the first actual level. It's a fairly solid level. I don't mind the first level, but to me, it is the most basic. It's very just ground level. Like, it's not that insane. It's not that interesting from a level design standpoint. It has some interesting themes of him, but it doesn't really dive into them that much. So for me, it's like just a middle of the road. It's just okay in my opinion. But I'm gonna give my biggest issue with this level. The crown killer has already been dealt with. We're about, I'd say, 3 to 4 hours into the game at this point, and we've already dealt with the crown killer. The crown killer was set up as the main narrative sort of hook for this game, and it's already been dealt with. Like, this is it. That's the crown killer dealt with. One of the biggest plot points has already been solved within the first 4 hours. This is my problem with the game's narrative overall. It has too many moving pieces, and this game's biggest issue is it outlines all the main targets almost immediately, and each mission is just us dealing with one of those targets just in succession. In the first game, you would take out a target, the Admiral, Pendleton, they would all learn something, and then that would lead you on to take on another character, to find someone else to deal with. It wasn't like, oh, these are the 10 people we need to take out this one first, then this one. It wasn't that. It felt more like an actual war, like you were actually targeting specific people because they were valuable, because there was something there, because they needed to be dealt with, or they realized, oh, this person is a problem. You slowly unraveled the mystery that was the assassination of Jessamine. You've slowly figured out that more and more people were a part of it, and each time we got a new target, it was revealed that they were involved with it. But of course, then Dishonored 1 had the big reveal at the end where the Admiral himself would betray us. Dishonored 2 doesn't have this. It is such like a straightforward game. There's no fat to it at all. The story is so basic. And again, this is to allow for 2 protagonists to be interchangeable for it. But that's a problem in my opinion. That is a massive problem in the first game. While many people say it's not that amazing of a story, I think it's written really, really well. This game feels really flat. There is no big reveal or moment where it's like, holy shit, they betrayed us, or you figure something out, like you interrogate Sokolov and he tells you of something like Lady Boyle was financially responsible for everything. Yeah, there is no moments like that. You just move on to the next one. So
when we take out the crown killer, Hypatia, it doesn't feel that impactful because it didn't lead us to something else. And that's a big issue I have overall with the story. It gets to the point, in my opinion, where I just stopped really caring. I was questioning at times, why are we targeting these people again? Oh, because they did this? Okay, that makes sense. But what will that lead to? Why do we need to target this person? Genuinely, this is a big issue I have overall. There is one point this happens, like the targets are connected, but that's like right at the end of the game, and all the other ones feel kind of pointless in my opinion. But with the crown killer being dealt with, we figure out where Sokolov is being held and where he is being imprisoned. He is being imprisoned by our next target, Kiran Jindosh. Okay, makes sense. We learn where he is, and now we're going to go save him, and he's being held by one of the other main targets. Okay, Kiran Jindosh is positioned as the new genius, the new Sokolov, having made these mechanical soldiers that we saw at the beginning of the game absolutely clot our personal guard. A warning almost of what we're going to have to face in the near future and within the next mission. And talking to Megan, we begin our voyage to that next mission, the Clockwork Mansion.
Jindosh is important to the Duke's inner circle. The Grand Guard watches his mansion, and they'll call down the entire city if they find out who you are.
I'll make sure they don't. You said there's a wall of light cutting off access to the carriage station?
Yes, but there's a black market shop nearby. They sell on the sly. Ever use a rewiring tool?
Corvo taught me the theory.
Good. Get past the wall of light, then ride the carriage to where Jindosh lives. And there's a reason people are afraid of his mansion.
I'll get it done.
Emily, take care of this crazy man and his clockwork soldiers, then bring Sokolov back. He means a lot to me.
To open the mission, we take to the streets of the lower Aventa district and have to make it to the station to travel to the mansion. But of course, before that, we can find another outsider shrine.
I'll tell you a story about Kiran Jindosh, a prodigy from Karnaka. Self-taught, he was hailed by the Academy of Natural Philosophy as a genius who would surpass Sokolov and bring about an age of enlightenment. But just 2 years after his arrival, he was banned from the Academy for life, for reasons that are still not public. When they deported him, he left behind a machine that drank seawater, playing music that brought listeners to tears. They promptly took it apart, and it has never worked since.
Pretty much giving us information on Jindosh's life. He was a prodigy that was meant to surpass Sokolov, but he was banned from the academy he attended due to his actions, and a machine that he created was disassembled for some reason. But what was he banished from the academy for? Well, it was because he was a little bit, let's say, free-spirited. Well, insane, I would say. Bit of a crazy scientist. He was very into doing autopsies on people while they were still living. He also created machines that weren't really to progress humankind, but more to instill fear upon them. You can find a note within this level about a young noble girl who was given a gift by Jindosh, and the gift was a mechanical cat that, whatever it was, it scared the girl so much that she was then placed into a mental hospital and never seen again. But his banishment from the academy was mainly due to the people that Sokolov was associated with, I would assume, and maybe even Sokolov himself. It would explain his actions of taking Sokolov and keeping him prisoner, and also his disdain towards him. But this is actually an interesting theme that the game might be diving into, especially during the Industrial Revolution and around that time period, is the progression of technology and the effect it could have on humanity. It is an interesting point, and it is a very current theme at the moment with the rise of AI. Does the level actually dive into it that much? Not really, but there is some themes around that with the harm that can be caused with progressing technology by all means necessary. In the Industrial Revolution, for example, the increase in use of machinery in factories and such saw a lot of people lose their jobs because they didn't need that many people working in these factories. This has happened in every single field. The farming industry used to have an insane amount of people working in the fields, but now most of them aren't needed as one machine can do that same job. Way more efficient and
for less money as well. And now, of course, with the rise of AI, we are seeing the potential that many computer-related jobs, mainly associated within computer science, such as software engineering, is seeing less and less jobs available for new people. It's a shrinking industry, but growing economically. It is an interesting theme, and I do wish the level would dive more into this, but it doesn't really. It kind of leaves it there in the opening and then doesn't really touch upon it again. But anyway, after heading in, we need to grab a rewire tool to actually enter the station and move into the main objective. But before we can actually buy it, Paolo, the leader of the Howlers, the big local gang of Karnaca, come to pay a visit to the store, and we have to make ourselves scarce, and we shouldn't be spotted. But if you do get spotted, you'll quickly find out that Paolo possesses some form of magic or sorcery, preventing you from killing him as he turns into a bunch of white rats. Also, he is voiced by Pedro Pascal. But acquiring the rewire tool that we need, we can take it over to the station and actually infiltrate it, and using the cart to travel on over to the Clockwork Mansion. Well, into the upper event district, which we can just navigate again through to unlock either the carriage pathway to the mansion or just parkour our way over to the namesake place for this mission, the Clockwork Mansion. The Clockwork Mansion is honestly a really cool place, with it all being connected to levers and buttons, all of which, once pulled or pressed, completely change the layout and move parts of the mansion around, turning the mansion from a very basic level that would just have you run through it and stealth your way through it to this massive, almost puzzle box with a bunch of secrets hidden within it, such as small caches of money which you need to go into the moving parts to access, or even shortcuts which allow you to skip entire parts of the levels if you know where to move. And alongside all of the puzzle, you have the Clockwork Soldiers, which will make their proper introduction within this level, and they kind of replace the tall boys from the first game, but they feel way more deadly and way more aggressive, and they will be the main hindrance of this level. But the main gimmick we will be engaging with for this entire level will be the mansion itself and solving the puzzles within it to not only navigate through it, but also find any little goodies that you want. And it's a really fun level from beginning to end, and it genuinely shows how talented and skilled Arcane are at making levels. My one complaint about this level is I wish it was actually later in the game, so you'd have more powers and more kit, and you'd be more familiar with the game and its mechanics to have more fun with the level. Also, I wish it was longer. Now, if you don't play the level in the specific way that it intends you to, so you don't follow like the correct path immediately, this level can be extremely short. You can finish this entire level within minutes if you know the shortcuts, which is kind of a double-edged sword because it is really cool to find these shortcuts on like a repeat playthrough and like skip the entire level. But there's definitely people out there that would have found these shortcuts in their first playthrough and they wouldn't have played most of the mission. And Clockwork Mansion to them might have been a, let's say, lesser mission. It wasn't as long, it wasn't as impactful, and they didn't spend as much time here. I genuinely encourage you, if you do play this game, and especially this level, play this game just for this level as well, because it's like a masterclass in level design. Really take your time with it, really engage with it, play around with all the moving parts, actually go into it, because it's so fun. And it's definitely the highlight mission of this game entirely. It's basically the golden cat of this game. But reaching the laboratory, we can either kill or knock out Jindosh, and to knock him out or deal with him non-lethally, we put him in an electric chair to permanently damage his brain.
The electroshock machine should work now.
I won't be bothered by any more of your rambling. No! You don't know what you're doing! Anything! I'll give you anything you want! Stop! Don't do this! So much will be lost! An age of advancement!
Too bad it had to come to this, Jindosh.
Removing the very gift that he has prided himself and put all his value on for his entire life, making him entirely useless to the Duke and Delilah. A bit extreme and a bit, I would say, terrifying to basically make him a vegetable, I guess. But I guess it follows the themes from the first game, where the targets are being forced to feel the oppression of their actions. Jindosh, again, used machines to control people, but he also experimented on people.
So us doing this to him feels full circle. It makes sense. But doing whatever you did to him, we can now make our way down to the assessment area and go through a very elaborate maze to save Sokolov, who again, love his voice actor, Roger L. Jackson, the voice of fucking Ghostface.
Emily Caldwin, if you're here, things have gone further than I thought. But Kieran Jindosh?
Not dead, but I used his machines on him. His mind is not what it was.
You were an interesting little girl. You've become a fascinating woman.
We find Sokolov is very weak and not being able to walk or even stay awake for more than 5 seconds, so we have to carry him all the way back to Megan to take him back to the Dreadful Whale, which is fairly fun. As we're backtracking through the entire level, we find that the witches have now appeared in parts of the level, killing any guards that we left alive and now replacing them, making it actually basically an entirely new level because you're not doing the same thing. You have to get over new objectives. Honestly, I really do like Clockwork Mansion, not only for the mansion itself. All parts of this mission, the beginning, the end, backtrack, they are all a massive highlight part of this game. The actual objective is enjoyable. Having 2 separate objectives that you have to deal with makes this level entirely one of the best in the game. But I hope you might notice there is something different about the mansion itself. It feels disconnected, like it's completely different from the rest of the game. And this is actually a complaint I do have. I think the mansion works, I really like it, but the levels, their central set piece, I'll call them, like the main area, they all feel very different and very segregated. They don't feel like they're really part of the same world. So you have the Clockwork Mansion, which feels completely different to the Adamaya Institute. Then you'll have the Palace, which will be later in the game, which the Duke lives within, which looks nothing like Clockwork Mansion. Then you'll have Stilton's Manor, which is completely different. It looks completely different. They all just look different and they're not cohesive. That's my main problem. And again, this is a big issue that Dishonored 2 has. Its entire setting doesn't feel very cohesive. Dunwall was very cohesive from beginning to end in Dishonored 1 and all of its DLCs. But Karnaca and Serkonos, it just doesn't have that same cohesiveness. It doesn't feel like it's all part of the same world, in my opinion. They feel very different, and it feels like you're in different countries entirely for certain missions. Bit nitpicky, I know, but there is parts of the game where I was kind of pulled out because I was like, why does this building exist like completely different architecturally to this other building? It just kind of threw me off a bit. But returning to the boat, we were of course awoken by a strange dream world again, but instead of the outsider here, we meet Delilah instead.
Surprised I can pull you into this place? The outsider marked me long ago. I made you flee your precious tower and turned your father into cold stone. How difficult for you. But when I was young, sweet Jessamine and I were close as sisters, sharing a secret. Emperor Caldwin had another daughter, born in shame to a kitchen maid.
Am I dreaming? If not, how is Delilah doing this?
Jessamine and I played games in the tower, but at night I'd go back to the servants' quarters to cockroaches and thin gruel. Emperor Daddy would visit and tell me if I was good. Next year I'd be old enough to come to court to be a princess. Then one day, pretty Jessamine broke something worth a fortune, and the spy master caught us. She claimed I did it, and he whipped me in the garden house until I bled. My mother lost her kitchen job, and that night we were out on the streets with no place to sleep.
I didn't bring it. Would you like to tell me what you did? We were just playing.
Young lady Jessamine, what is your account?
It was her. Delilah's light. She broke it.
nastiest parts of Dunwall, ending up in debtor's prison. Jessamine died quick on an assassin's blade, but my mother lingered for weeks after a fat guard broke her jaw. They threw me out when she died. I looked up at the lights of Dunwall Tower and swore revenge. Washing bedsheets in a brothel, I painted on the side, until Anton Sokolov took me as a student. That's the polite word for it. I was crafty even before the outsider marked me, and survived the worst the Empire could offer. Now, it's your turn.
My mother's sick. She needs help.
Your mother kicked off while you were out begging. She's another bag of bones now, girl.
What? No!
The sentence is served that you'll be tossed out with the others. You can't stay here anymore.
So this is revealing why Delilah is doing what she is doing, basically telling us that, again, she is the half-sister of Jessamine and was abandoned by their father, the previous emperor, as she was the bastard child of his, born to a maid or a cook or something, one of his workers. And yes, in these old societies, a bastard child and a child born out of wedlock was seen as disgusting, an evil thing, something sinful. It was heavily looked down upon. A fun thing to know is that many people would get people pregnant and they would rush into marriages. That was just what happened. It's why there's almost that sort of feeling about it now when you hear about people accidentally getting someone pregnant. The thought of marriage instantly comes up in their head, and that's because that's how it always has been, weirdly enough. People feel like that's what you're meant to do because it's been so ingrained within history, and especially back in the day, it was basically like a death sentence to your status, your reputation, if you had a child out of wedlock. Not only for the man, the emperor himself, it would be a massive issue for him, but also the woman. It would be seen as disgusting because, again, you're meant to save yourself for marriage. I don't give a fuck, do what you want. But, purity, controlling yourself, all that shit, whatever religion goes on about. That shit, yeah, makes sense. It is a good lesson to learn, but marriage is expensive, I get the point. For a fun fact about Victorian societies as well, depending on who the mother and father was of the child that was born out of wedlock, it would significantly impact the mother's life way more. The fathers could basically just disown the child. They would be seen as a bit lesser. They would take a slight hit to their reputation, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. Women, though, they would be shunned from their families. They would be dismissed and lose jobs if they had one, because many employers and rich people believe that if you employed people that did have children out of wedlock, it would promote that behavior more. And because men would often just disappear, run away to other cities, just denounce their family and run off, it would be harder to track. But a woman would have to basically take care of the child. They were completely responsible for it, financially, legally, everything. And a sad fact is that infants that were born into unmarried couples were twice as likely to die in infancy. Probably due to a lot of other factors like the women losing their jobs, but I think you can probably guess why double the rate was there. There was probably a lot of infant killing because they just couldn't take care of them. They just knew it was worse for the children. They would not be able to live a happy life at all. Bit sad. It does show how almost disturbing the real world was at one point, and that Dishonored does do a pretty good job at displaying how ruthless people were in general. But basically the Emperor didn't want to throw them out initially, so they kind of kept them hidden and was just like, yeah, it's this child that this worker has and we're gonna take care of her. They kept her hidden, but eventually something happened. Delilah broke something, but actually Jessamine broke it, and then Delilah and her mother were thrown out of the royal workforce and they were shunned by them. And it's a big plot point basically that Delilah was the Emperor's daughter and that something happened and she got thrown out. But what I think is the most interesting thing is the reason Delilah was thrown out seems so childish. Something broke and that led to her and her mother being thrown out, which led to her mother dying on the streets. And at this point in the game, I remember thinking, can we trust Delilah? And I thought that was going to be a more interesting aspect of this game's narrative, is can we truly trust Delilah, the words of the outsider,
and especially the words given to us by Jessamine, the heart, which was created and given to us by the outsider. Can we trust any of these words that are being said to them? Are any of them true, or are they the beliefs and words of someone that has gone mentally insane, Delilah? And from the first game's DLC, that would make sense. There was many mentions about Delilah and her upbringing in that DLCs, and mentions of Jessamine and them two being close within childhood. But when we met Delilah and were going against her as Dowd, she was obsessed about getting the throne. So obsessed that she was willing to overwrite Emily's consciousness in the DLC so she could take the throne. Not as herself, but as Emily. So she would willingly take her niece, technically, life away just so she could rule. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense if she's gone completely insane after the events of that DLC. Well, that would make sense if Delilah didn't have a claim to the throne. The entire DLC in the first game feels so pointless now, because if Delilah technically did have some sort of claim to the throne at this point, she could have started to enact her plan that she does in Dishonored 2. You could argue that maybe the people like the Duke of Sokonos weren't as powerful and influential back then, but it feels really odd because she goes from this one plan, which is taking over Emily's consciousness, which I don't understand why she couldn't just try do again in this game, because she almost did do it in the first game's DLC. It was just because Dowd was there and he felt so guilty of what he did that he saved Emily. None of those characters are there anymore. We don't know where Dowd is in Dishonored 2. So if she did it again, it would be more of a surefire way to do this. But stepping into completely overthrow Emily and say that she has a claim to the throne puts a target on her back. It feels more stupid, but what I think is the more likely case, this is the writers changing the story. Delilah's actions, to me, either come up one of two ways. One, she's crazy, and nothing she says can be trusted, and she never was a member of the family, and she's just doing whatever she can to get revenge on the royal family because they caused her mother to be killed. Or in the first game, she was as well. She was also the Emperor's daughter, but that would make the actions she took in the first DLC a bit more odd, because she could just do the same plan that she did in this game against a young child, which would be way easier to overthrow than Emily, who has now been fully trained by Corvo. Or, you know, they just fucking retconned the whole idea and then made her related to Jessamine because the writers wanted to make it more personal and make you feel sorry for her. That's probably the right answer. This is one of the biggest issues I have with this game. Its story just feels so conflicting with the last game, and that's mainly due to Delilah herself. Her characterization and her actions, to me, don't really make a lot of sense overall. And there's many other issues with this game in how it tells its story. Mainly, it explicitly states way too much. Nothing is up to interpretation. I think it would have been so much better if it's never actually confirmed if Delilah is the Emperor's daughter. It would be such an interesting narrative point to consider that maybe she truly is of the royal bloodline, because then maybe her actions do make sense. She was wronged by the royal family, and it makes you question what happened. But then also you might question, is she lying? It's a very interesting narrative, in my opinion, that makes you ask those questions, and that's what a narrative should do. But the heart itself, Jessamine, confirms it. And the heart is Jessamine. It completely is, because the game states it multiple times. Jessamine herself confirms the story entirely of what happened. She was thrown out for something stupid, and her mother died because of it, and now has led to this. But she is 100% royal blood. And unfortunately, the problem with this game's story as well is it's actually worse than the DLC story. Dishonored 2 basically takes the base game Dishonored 1 story and combines it with the DLC stories to make one story that has none of the actual, I guess, fun parts and interesting parts. It takes all of the meat out, so now you just have a flavorless piece of meat. There's no fat on it, so there's nothing to cook it with. So to me, the story feels very rehashed, especially from playing the first game and its DLCs. It's almost entirely the same stuff, beat for beat. And I really wanted to save this for the end, but I want to bring it up now. One of my biggest complaints about Dishonored 2 is the lack of new characters that actually feel like they have a big influence on the story. Dishonored 1 was filled with so many characters. You had 3 characters that betrayed you at the end of the game. You had Corvo and Emily, Piero and Sokolov. You had Callista, who was fairly important to the story, Samuel. Then you had Dowd and his assassins alongside Billy Lurk. Then you had all the other targets as well. This game basically has Emily and Corvo, only one of them, depending on which one you pick, Megan, Sokolov, and then the targets that we chase. That's it. And Delilah, unfortunately, feels very flat. I think she is an interesting character and she could be something so much more interesting. But I feel like the craziness of her either isn't played up enough or they don't want to portray her as crazy. They want her to actually feel like she has a claim to the throne and is like a smart, cool character. I like her, but make her absolutely crazy. Not in the style I like, make her go beyond that. I just think it's a shame because the game could do so many interesting things with its narratives that really makes you question things. And there's just this one thing that kind of holds it back, in my opinion, that just makes it feel a bit more flat. Like these memories we're seeing from Delilah, I feel like should just make no sense whatsoever. Like they're ramblings of a crazy person, but maybe there's truths hidden within them, but the game doesn't do that. These are entirely true. So, but the next question I had in my head is technically, would Delilah have any claim to the throne? It completely depends on what monarchy you're following, what rules you're following. If you're following the UK rules, either old or new, no, she doesn't. But Dunwall and the Kingdom and the Empire of the Isles have a very different way of how the throne works. To me, the throne seems more like it's almost can be taken and given to whoever they deem correct. We saw that in the first game after Jessamine died. So if you have enough political support, you could take it. But she doesn't really have any right to the throne at all. Jessamine, who was the fully legitimate, non-illegitimate child of the Emperor and his wife, had a child who she named as the next in line. So she's 100%. So Delilah technically has no right to the throne. And interestingly enough, you can find notes and reports from like newspapers in levels that mention the other parts of the empire are actually declaring war upon Delilah and her claim to the throne, almost segregating and disrupting the entire empire. And that could have been an interesting part of the story. Maybe we see other dukes and duchesses come in and they might have a bigger influence in the story. No, that doesn't happen. We don't get anything like that, which could have been interesting to see political conflicts amongst multiple countries that are a part of the same empire, kind of like here in the UK, where we have Scotland who always badger us, begging basically to go independent, but they can never do it. And now we have Wales doing the same thing as well. Could be interesting, but the game doesn't do that, of course. But anyway, actually returning to the whale, we find Sokolov definitely isn't the man that he once was.
Anton, when I brought you back, you could barely speak. But it's been 3 days.
They tortured him. His body is covered with bruises.
Delilah has the throne, and my father is missing. This is Anton Sokolov, the greatest mind in the Empire.
No, Emily. Megan is right. I can make electricity move from one side of the room to the other, but Delilah is beyond my understanding. When I came to Sarkonos, I meant to leave everything behind. But when the assassination started, I couldn't ignore it. By the time Megan and I connected the murders to the Duke, it was too late. The Crown Killer came for me. It kept me alive from my knowledge, but I saw things. Jindosh often had a visitor, Brianna Ashworth.
She's the curator of the Royal Conservatory.
Yes, Ashworth is dangerous, as obsessed with the occult as Delilah. Apparently, she's working on a device called the Oraculum.
There's more to her than either of you know.
If Ashworth is one of Delilah's lieutenants, I need to eliminate her. Who knows what this device is capable of, or what she's up to.
So the Duke himself has been the one truly behind all the Crown Killer murders, orchestrating it all for Delilah to create political uneasiness towards Emily and Corvo. Is basically what is happening again here in the UK. You have a certain somebody who says something in Parliament to try and make our current Prime Minister look bad, to try turn public opinion towards him. That's all politics is. It's just trying to turn public opinion on your side. But more importantly, Sokolov gives us our next target, Ashworth, who is working on a device called the Oraculum. But most interestingly, we can actually question Sokolov about the painting of Delilah herself.
I have trouble remembering my mother's face sometimes, but there might be some resemblance.
Painted from memory. While trying to learn more about what the Duke of Sarkonos was up to, I began hearing a name I hadn't heard in almost 2 decades. Delilah Copperspoon. We painted together for a time, but her obsession with the occult and the Caldwin family took her out of my circles.
I saw some of her paintings. Beautiful, but somehow sinister.
You knew Delilah? All this time traveling with you and you never mentioned that?
My past is none of your business. You don't own everything, Empress.
Another life, another life. Megan came to Karnaca to reinvent herself. Maybe I did as well, but the Duke of Sarkonos had other ideas.
It seems that he was trying to figure her out and also himself out, just like Megan was after the events of the first game, but he never actually learnt anything, so I guess the painting was kind of pointless. But now, alongside Megan, we can make our way to the next mission, the Syria Gardens and the Royal Conservatory.
There'll be a Grand Guard presence outside the Royal Conservatory. Inside, be prepared for anything. Ashworth runs with an eclectic crowd. They'll be the real danger.
Someday I'd like to know more about how you met Ashworth.
I know you would. Trust me. Ashworth is important to Delilah. Which brings up something else. You might be able to exploit the Abbey of the Everyman in removing Ashworth from play. Turns out the Vice Overseer in Karnaca has been watching Ashworth from a hidden outpost near the Royal Conservatory. Check it out first if you want more options. Remember, if she's still working with Delilah, Ashworth is a grave threat.
Thanks, Megan. See you soon.
So the Church of Everyman has made a return and seem to be up to something, but to open the mission we find ourselves in quite the rundown looking dock area. But the actual area of this mission looks very nice and very moody. I do like this part of the mission. But of course there is another wall of light in our path, so we need to find a way around it, but not before finding yet another outsider shrine who will tell us a little bit more about Miss Brianna Ashworth.
Look at you, making your way across this shuddering city. Brianna Ashworth would have been miserable as a member of high society, forced to wed some bloated banker. Her only moments of real freedom, getting drunk at fancy balls, and slipping away to couple with strangers. It would have ended in an unhappy marriage and a late-night plunge into an icy river. But just before Mother and Father married her off, so many years ago, she found Delilah instead. It was all highways and graveyards after that, never looking back. Vice Overseer Byrne is an ambitious man, but he believes in the Abbey's mission, protecting the good people of the Empire against the likes of us. You know he'd be happier deep down if this ended with Brianna Ashworth's head on a spike. Maybe yours as well.
Seems that Ashworth didn't want to live the typical high society life. She didn't want to get married for some kind of gain or so that her father could gather something from her marriage. So she ran away with Delilah, and the new Vice High Overseer very much doesn't like her and would like for some civility to be returned to the world due to what Miss Ashworth here has been causing for Delilah, most likely associated with some witches. But it does appear that the Overseers aren't exactly fans of Delilah and her rule, a potential ally that we could side ourselves with in the future to help us reclaim the throne.
But now actually making our way into the Royal Conservatory, we find that the witches have entirely taken over the place, acting as the main enemy type for this mission. But the central gimmick, I guess if you could call it one, for this mission would be these owls, allowing for all 3 floors of the conservatory to be accessible at all times, giving the level some insane verticality movement to it. And combine that with the witch's ability to teleport, you get this almost dynamically shifting level with patrols and guards moving around all over the place. Honestly, I do like this location, but it's probably the weakest level in the entire game in my opinion. And I guess another issue I have with overall all of the levels is each of the levels in the first game were used to highlight a big issue with societies in that day. Again, Golden Cat, the role of women, sex work in these old societies. You then had the slum level where you would go through and see the wealth inequality. The Lady Boyle level, you had again the role of women, and also how high wealthy elites were literally living next door to people in squalor and being oppressed by guards and whatever. They all fulfilled some sort of meaning and theme and reflected the society, but these levels don't do it that much. Ashworth could really be good for that. She is a noble woman who was going to be married off, and she ran away from that. The conservatory could literally be reflecting that if you look at it in that way. All these owls are animals that have been taken and made to be these trophy pieces, these things to gawk and look at, and that's basically what women were back in the day, especially within the higher elites and the noble families. They were things to take and possess and own, things to use almost as a trophy. Oh, I married into this family. Oh, I married the beautiful woman of wherever. I married this duchess. I married a princess. It was always about gaining something. And you could do that with this level, but it doesn't. Again, the theme is there, but it isn't hooked in. There isn't that central narrative within the level. And again, this level visually is so disconnected from the other levels that we've been doing previously. It just feels very different in my opinion. But the conservatory is fairly simple, either finding an explanation on how to use the device that Ashworth has been working on to remove her powers, or just straight up killing her. Killing her is actually interesting because she can counter your powers, so if you use far reach to try get away from her or blink, she will just grab you and prevent you from doing that, or if you try use devouring swarm on her, the rats won't attack her. She is interesting to fight. It's just a shame that you can take an explosive bullet and just blow her head off. But doing so removes her as a physical threat, or you disconnect her from Delilah and her powers, so she no longer can use the powers Delilah gave her, making her useless to Delilah, and Delilah just discards her. Almost an interesting narrative point, which you could look into how higher noble families will discard people who they deem as not worth it or worthless now. Kind of like what happened to Delilah and her mother with the Emperor. Wow, that's an interesting narrative point. Are we going to take it anywhere? Fuck no, we're going to forget about it now. But damaging the device, it prevents Delilah from using it and the blind sisters of the oracular order to enforce her own will upon the world. But dealing with Miss Ashworth here however you feel like it, we can now make our great escape back to Megan to finish the level.
So it's done.
Ashworth won't be a problem anymore.
Good. But Emily, there's something else. Back when I lived in Dunwall, I did things that I'm not proud of.
Isn't that a requirement for citizenship?
What I've got to say is not a joke. I knew Delilah and Ashworth. Bought into their bullshit. Which led me down a bad road. To be honest, before all this, I thought Delilah dead. I don't want to get into it right now. But I felt like you should know. There are things I regret.
All right, Megan. Thank you for opening up. If only a little.
I'm starting to feel like you deserve it. Are you ready to leave now?
Seems like Megan has something from her past that she wasn't too proud of, and she had some link to Delilah in the past, and she greatly regrets the actions that she took in this past, but she won't reveal entirely what those actions are. So now we head back to the Dreadful Whale to end the level, and upon waking we set our sights on dealing with Delilah's immortality, And the answer to that lies within the home of Aramis Stilton, an old ally of the Duke and the owner of the Karnaca mines. A very rich man, but he hasn't been seen in years, being held up in his bunker of a house in the Dust District. But before we head out, we can talk to Sokolov about Stilton.
We need to know why Delilah can't be killed. Everything we've learned implies that something strange happened at Aramis Stilton's home 3 years ago, but then he disappeared.
Stilton lived in a bunker kept secure by a fancy lock made by Jindosh. Maybe inside you'll learn more about how to stop Delilah.
But I have to get there first. Through a ruin created by the Duke, where my father grew up.
Megan had an intriguing idea. Paolo is leader of the Howlers. He wants Vice Overseer Byrne killed, and of course, Byrne wants Paolo dead too. Both groups will attack you on sight, but walk in with the corpse of their chief enemy, and they'll treat you like family.
You think they'll help me get into Aramis Stilton's home?
I'm pretty sure that will work.
Seeing this place and these people, I can feel my perspective changing. How will I be different after this?
So it seems we need help getting into Stilton's home, and to do so we have a few options to do it, siding with either the Howlers and bringing them the Chief High Overseer, or siding with the Overseers and bringing them Paolo, the leader of the Howlers. So this level is very much about picking a side and determining which one is better. So let's actually head to the Dust District with Sokolov.
Who was the man I'm after? Aramis Stilton?
An ally to the old Duke, loyal and smart. Stilton helped build modern Karnaca with those silver mines. Started as a miner and worked his way up until he was a prince of industry. But now the new Duke drives the mine crews night and day. Dust falls non-stop onto the district. What was once prosperous is now in ruins.
I suppose the Duke doesn't care, as long as he sips from silver cups.
And what are the cups at Dunwall Tower made from, Empress? In any case, you'll have to pass through the Dust District to reach Stilton's home. Maybe he's still in there, or maybe he's dead.
Now, the Dust District is probably my personal favourite level of the game, as I think it has so much going on, and to me it is the most fun to play through. We first of all need to meet Megan by quickly slipping past some guards, which can be made easier when the dust storm starts to kick up from the mines, obscuring the guards' visions. But meeting with Megan, she gives us the rundown on the area. So the Howlers would be easier to attack, but Paolo is adept with magic, which if you hadn't learnt from earlier, it requires you to be killed twice. So even if you do kill him, you'll need to kill him again. While the Overseers are far more reinforced and are much more deadly, with their building being harder to infiltrate. So which one should we go for? What does each side stand for? And which one is the best for the Empire? Well, the Howlers are thugs who don't want to be controlled, but they want true freedom. They are very aggressive and very against any sort of high governing control. They want everyone to be free, but they are, again, thugs. They could be very easily corrupted if the wrong leader is leading them. And hopefully Paolo would be that man that would keep them from going down this path. While the Overseers are a religious organization which control and keep people in line. And this mission is completely about what do you value? Do you value total freedom, which could see crime becoming more rampant and people could actually live a worse life because people might start pushing people around, the weak might fall and the strong might rise? Or control and order? Yes, the Overseers are a bit controlling, but at least they ensure that everyone's able to live a fair, honest life, as long as everyone sticks to the rules. But what does the outsider have to say about these men?
In case you're wondering, Paolo's not one of those unhinged cultists who believe I will grant them favors if they leave a big enough offering or play just the right musical notes. He doesn't care a fig for me. But he put up this shrine because he found the hand of an old witch I knew once. And Paolo saw right away that it pays to have an edge. Sometimes pieces of us linger long after we're gone. Duke of Serkonos inherited a vibrant city and wasted no time stripping it to the bone. What will he leave behind? And what about you? Who will you leave to pick up the pieces here in the Jewel of the South?
It seems he doesn't favour either person and is more interested to see who we will pick to rule over Serkonos after all is said and done, as one of these people will have a major influence on the area and especially these groups after the events of the game. But what about if you don't want to kill anyone? What if you're doing a full non-lethal run? You'll notice that each objective, either siding with one of these parties, you'll have to kill the other's leader. So what if you don't want to kill anyone? Well, if you find the Silvergraph studio, you'll find 2 coffins within it and a note about shipping some people off to the mines. Inside the Silvergraph studio, we can actually find the answer to the lock that is locking the pathway to Aramis Stilton's mansion. So if we just bring the 2 leaders to these boxes and ship them off, they get basically the same fate that the Pendleton twins got in the first game. It doesn't really work, this punishment, as well as what the Pendleton twins got, because these people weren't using the mines as much. If, say, the Duke or Aramis, who is the owner of the mines, was sent to the mines, it would make sense in like a thematic reason, but it doesn't really work here because like they don't have any association with the mines. We just get rid of these 2 people who do a lot of harm to the general area. Paolo is a ruthless man who has harmed many people, and the current leader of the Overseers isn't as popular and is very by the books and by the rules, and currently is being extremely ruthless and unforgiving to the general population. But an interesting theme of this mission is something that Sokolov brings up at the start of the mission, asking Emily where she thinks all the silverware comes from in the palace. It's an interesting theme and I think could work really, really well, of making Emily reflect on how she's been living in luxury and she's been basically living off of the hard work of others. And I think it could be a really interesting topic and narrative to go into, especially for this mission, but it doesn't dive into it fully. The 2 main targets have nothing to do with this, and that's kind of another big complaint I have, is it just all feels disconnected. It just doesn't do it very well in my opinion, and I think it could be a very interesting narrative for Emily. But of course, because Corvo's also a playable character, if Sokolov said this to him, it would seem extremely stupid, because Corvo grew up in this area. Literally, Corvo grew up in the Dust District. You can find his childhood home as an Easter egg in this level, which is fun. And I think this level perfectly encapsulates my issue with the game's general story. You have these narrative themes, these elements that clearly the developers want to dive into like they did the first game, but due to having 2 protagonists, there's almost this unwillingness or inability to do so. This topic would work really well for Emily, but for Corvo, it doesn't. It doesn't hit as hard because Corvo did grow up here. He knows what it's like to not have luxury and be able to have nice silverware to use. And I think that's the key problem with Dishonored 2, and the key problem with having multiple protagonists is balancing the story between them. Arcane didn't do that. My favorite example of multiple protagonists in a story that comes to the top of my head is, of course, Grand Theft Auto 5. You have multiple different stories and themes and narratives that each of the characters go through. The fact that this entire game is playable by both Emily and Corvo, I think actually makes it weaker. And I think a smarter way to do this game would have actually have certain levels for Emily and Corvo, and then in New Game Plus you can play whoever. But this would allow each character to have their own stories within it that are unique to them. Having something unique and something that feels more familiar to them, something that is personal, makes the story better and makes people able to relate more. Because they can't make it too personal, it makes the story less relatable. It's harder to actually dive into and feel more emotion from. That's what Dishonored 1 did really well. Dishonored 2 stepped back. It knew it couldn't do this, so they did it purposefully worse, which is a really interesting thing. It's an interesting point, and I'd love to know if you guys actually have that same issue that I did. Anyway, but dealing with the 2 leaders however you see fit, I threw both of them in the boxes and sent them to the mines. Doing so, you'll get the answer to the lock, which can then be used to unlock the locked door to Aramis Stilton's mansion. Now completing level 6 and moving straight on to level 7, which I think is a really interesting level.
Aramis's mansion. We find it completely decayed and falling apart, and we can find Stilton inside not doing too sharp, but trying to talk to him, the outsider pays us a visit instead.
3 years ago, something inside Aramis Stilton snapped like a cheap lock. A part of him and a part of this house never left that evening. The Duke's inner circle are still gathered here, setting their grand plan into motion. Delilah's plan. And a part of Aramis Stilton is always here, still breaking. The Void is not exactly a place, and it's much older and stranger than you could ever know. It watches you from within. And at the heart of Stilton's house, the Void is leaking through a pinprick left behind by Delilah's little trick. Even magic is perverted here, and things don't work like they should. Take this. Imagine it's a kind of timepiece. Go and watch the Duke and Delilah. See for yourself what they did.
3 years ago, something happened here and Stilton mentally broke. So we have been given a timepiece allowing us to travel back in time 3 years before the event that turned him crazy happened. And this level has you jumping back and forth between the two time periods to try find the source of Delilah's immortality, and more importantly, maybe change the past to make a positive change. And I fuck with this level heavily, as it adds a layer entirely to either stealth or combat, being able to zip between time periods, allowing you to set yourself up better past or just dodge attacks going back and forth between the time periods. It's a really fun level, and the puzzles that utilize it do it really, really well. But in the past, we can find Stilton and we can either kill him or knock him out, and doing this, it changes the present, no longer being an actual shithole, but actually quite a nice and well-maintained house. If Stilton is killed, the place is up for sale by someone completely different, and if he is still alive, we hear mentions that he's doing okay and not crazy. But sneaking our way into the room where the secret is stored, we find the room is almost being pulled between the two time periods, and we can find two meetings of the group that we've been hunting for this entire game.
Come on, just because he and my father were close.
What we're about to attempt has never been done. It's beyond my understanding, and certainly beyond yours. If anyone has any doubts, set them aside now.
This defies rational understanding. It's the frayed edge where natural philosophy crosses over into something else.
Yes, I can feel it. We risk madness.
All of you, Delilah is your rightful empress. You owe her this.
Delilah's stronger than before. The Duke and I have heard her voice, whispering to us. And now it's time. So take your positions. Focus on the void behind the door. You can feel her power, can't you?
By the stars. This is more exciting than any orgy I've ever attended. Do it now!
From the cold, from forever.
She lives.
How curious. It seems to have worked.
My spirit is safe now, inside this thing. Luca, you must lock it away.
I thought we'd lost you.
Brianna, Luca, I will never abandon you. Wait, you are hidden, but I know who you are. I know when you are. You've come to watch me return, and someday I'll come for you.
The void beyond the world is strange.
We see them revive or retrieve or rescue Delilah from the void that she was trapped in by Dowd in the first game's DLC, canonizing a certain path in that DLC. But they also planted something within this
statue effigy thing, making her immortal. So now we have a target to find, this statue thing, which will allow us to get rid of her immortality. But Delilah could also sense us watching from another point in time, meaning that she knows that someone was going to start hunting down and try to get rid of her immortality, telling us that most likely it's going to be very difficult to get to. Honestly, I really like this level. It is a bit simple, but the central gimmick of moving between the two time periods is really cool and really fun. So you basically have two completely separate levels within the one level. But getting the information that we are after, we can now head back out, but not before the outsider drags us into his dream again.
Very edges of the void. But this one is special. It's the place where my throat was cut 4,000 years ago. This is where my life ended, and where it began again. It's where they made me.
This part of the void feels older.
Right up until the end, I thought I'd find a way to escape. I fought, but the rooms only cut my skin, so I went limp. And then the knife touched my throat, and I knew I'd waited too long. The blood ran out, and I became a god. Now you know Delilah's secret. At the end of her days, she drifted through the void and should have been lost forever. But her will and cunning are second to none. She found this place. The island in the void where I became what I am. It changed her, and she discovered a way to draw from it, tapping into the power here. Delilah is a part of me now, and I don't like it. You have to give Delilah credit. She tore out a piece of herself and hid it away, inside a thing made of bones. She's made herself immortal. If you want to kill Delilah, you're going to have to find her spirit and give it back to her. Reaching it won't be easy, but what comes after that might be the hardest thing you will ever have to do.
Seems the outsider is now talking about his life, his personal life, and this is a bit of a big change for him, and I don't really like it. It's clear from this game that the outsider was once a person who became this godlike being, and man, I'm gonna be honest, I really preferred it when he was just this godlike being with no emotion and just wanted to watch and see what these people would do. It just doesn't suit the character in my opinion, and making everything so personal and giving reasons and explaining everything in detail doesn't make characters better. Sometimes it makes them feel more flat, and for the outsider here, it makes him feel extremely flat and less interesting. But I will save all of those complaints for the next game, which is entirely about the outsider himself. But making our way back to the boat, we can head back to the whale, and if you knocked out Stilton, you might notice that Megan has regrown an eye and an arm. Your actions in the past not only have affected her, but also other things in the world. As you were retracking through the Dust District, you might have noticed that there was some small changes to the environment which happened after whatever you did in the past. If you want me to quickly explain why Megan regrew an arm and an eye, basically after Stilton went crazy, Megan went and tried to investigate what was going on. She got caught out and got gravely injured by some guards, leading to her losing an eye and an arm. Us preventing Stilton from going crazy means that she never actually went to go find him or hunt him down, so she never got attacked. This is a really cool moment which you'll notice, like, oh shit, my actions had big consequences, but this is the only level that does it, and there's only changes within this level, I think. I didn't notice any other changes in future levels on my multiple playthroughs of the game. It's still cool nonetheless, but I really do wish more things changed within the future levels after this level, because I feel like Stilton is such a big important character that a lot more things would change if he never went insane. But now we move on to our next target, that being the Duke of Serkonos, and of course the figure statue thing that stores Delilah's powers of immortality. And upon waking up, Jessamine states this will be her last day, as we will use the heart to trap Delilah's spirit or soul or whatever is giving her immortality in that statue so that we can give it back to her. But now on deck we can see Stilton is talking to Megan and Sokolov about the Duke and his problems and what this level shall entail, giving us a map of the place itself.
Are you ready for this?
I've been inside a dozen castles and 100 mansions, and they're the same everywhere. The Duke's palace can't be anything worse than Lady Brisby's social afternoons.
Getting inside might not be the hard part. The Duke doesn't exactly run a tight ship.
Taking down Duke Abel is only part of the puzzle. You've also got to find whatever it is he's keeping for Delilah.
You were cryptic about what you gleaned from visiting the Dust District, which is fine. The world is better with a hint of mystery. But once you're inside the Grand Palace, whatever you do could affect things in Karnaca for years to come. Remember that.
I've got a map of the Grand Palace for you, and I know something that may be useful. There's a hidden lever in the pantry that opens a passage to the Duke's vault. If he's keeping anything precious for Delilah, I suspect that's where it'll be. Beyond that, good hunting.
I'll see what I can do. I know things in Karnaca are fragile, and I've got a lot to think about after all this is done.
So our two targets will be the Duke and the statue, and we need to be careful as our actions here will affect Karnaca for years to come. And heading out, we enter the next level, the Grand Palace.
At the palace, the Duke has a lookalike body double, meant to confuse assassins. A friend of mine washes the linens and said the double is a smoker, if that helps. Maybe you can talk to him. She says he's a nice guy. What a shitty job, pretending to be a tyrant like Duke Luca Abel.
It's remarkable that people tolerate the Duke.
He's got an army, control of the mines, and he's had your support from the capital. At the Duke's parties, people carve up the country while eating boiled crab.
There were parties like that in Dunwall, full of toadies sucking up to me, stabbing each other in the back.
Poor Empress. I could see those party lights from the roof of the abandoned butcher shop where I slept, in the flooded district.
I know you grew up hard, Megan. I used to wander Dunwall with my face hidden, but when I got tired of it, I could always go back to the tower. Karnaca's given me perspective.
Good. After you've eliminated the Duke, find what he's holding for Delilah and take it. When you're finished, I'll pick you up in the skiff.
So a body double is also in place to confuse us, but we could use the body double to our advantage if we could somehow get the body double on our side. They are absolutely identical and cannot be told apart to the normal person. But of course there is somewhat of a party going on at the palace, so there's going to be a lot of people scattered about. And this level I am not too big on. I like the body double gimmick but the actual look of the palace really bothers me because it looks so out of place in the entire game in my opinion. And this is what I mean. This looks like, to me, like a really modern LA house or one of those really expensive houses you'd see in like Spain in one of its like really posh, expensive port towns. It doesn't feel like a house that should exist within this area. It just feels so architecturally different and just looks very different. Yeah, you could argue it's, oh, the Duke, you know, abusing all the money and using it all to make this like luxurious house, and it's so expensive that it looks like it is from the future, basically. But I just don't like it. It just looks way too different in my opinion, and it kind of just clashes with the rest of the game artistically, I think. The section leading up to the palace, I actually don't mind. It's more of the streets of Karnaca, and we get to meet the outsider again who tells us again, think about what we are doing and really be careful about what we are doing. But the actual palace area of the mission, I don't fuck with it. It's a fun playthrough. There's a lot of guards and a couple of clockwork soldiers, but we have a choice to make here, mainly to do with the Duke. We can either kill both the Duke and his body double, or we can figure out which one's the body double and get him to join our side. knocking out the actual Duke and then giving the body double an item which is to prove which one is the real Duke. If you want to know how to figure it out, just listen to them when you're near them and they'll talk about certain things. And one of them will talk about hating to have to eat the same amount as the Duke to keep up with his weight gain. That's the body double. He hates having to imitate the Duke, and he'll mention many things about that. But after dealing with the Duke however you see fit, we can retrieve the key to his vault, which then allows us to actually head down to his vault, and inside we can find the very statue that contains Delilah's mortality. And taking it, Jessamine will give her final goodbye.
This is it. You must release me from this dead vessel. Only then will you be able to trap Delilah's spirit.
I don't know how I can do this. You were all I ever wanted.
I stayed as long as I could, trying to guide you. The world is better for your influence.
Be at peace, Mother. I will honor you, always.
I love you. And this is the final thought I carry into my veins.
So it's done. Now to take Delilah's soul back to them.
The heart of my half-sister? Only her flesh remains.
Kind of a nice ending for a mother and daughter or between lovers, but now with the heart, instead of us hearing Jessamine, Delilah will be the one to speak. But upon getting the mortality of Delilah and dealing with the Duke however you see fit...
What? This is outrageous. I'll have you all skinned alive and set in a salt bath. If only there was something we could do for him.
We can now return to the boat and head back to the whale and now focus on Delilah as our main target. And for mission 9, the final mission, we will return to Dunwall. But let's start by having a briefing with our remaining allies.
You know where to go to find Delilah, but how will you handle her? It's my hope that you have some sort of plan.
It could be tricky. She might not give me any choice but to fight. And Delilah deserves whatever she gets.
At my age, I've come to distrust words like deserve. As I've told you, I knew her long ago. Badly wounded, deep at her center, but cunning, and looking for a way to pull herself up. Perhaps more than anything, Delilah had a talent for imagining the world as a better place. If only that could have been channeled towards something less twisted.
It's probably too late to dwell on regrets.
Yes, you're right. In any case, please watch yourself. I've come to care a great deal about you.
Goodbye, Anton. Megan.
People have called me that for a long time, but it's a lie. My name is Billy Lurk.
Everyone's full of secrets. Why do I feel like you've got more to say?
Yeah. I can't believe I'm telling you this, but you deserve the truth. I'll just say it. 15 years ago, I ran with a mercenary gang. We got paid to kill people. Some who deserved it, some who didn't. The boss pulled me up from the Dunwall slums when I had nothing and had run out of rope. This is hard to admit.
Whatever it is, spit it out.
Our leader was the assassin Dowd, and I was part of the crew. Our last big job together, we were paid to...
You helped Dowd kill my mother?
Yes. I don't know what else to say. I've lived a very long time wishing I could take that day back, but I can't.
I can't ever forgive you for what you did. But suffering has a way of twisting people. You're a different woman today than you were then.
Yeah. We've all been hurt. But not all of us did what I did. Or became what Delilah became. I know you'll never get over it. But neither will I.
I hope not. Goodbye, Billy. I'm taking the skiff, and I'll go alone from here.
Well, it seems this will be it, and before we head out, Megan reveals that she was indeed Billy Lurk, who could have guessed. One of the various assassins a part of Dowd's group, the ones responsible for Jessamine's death in the first game. And you can choose your response to this, either telling her to fuck off or that you somewhat forgive her, but you never forgive her what actually happened. Also, if you want to know, she's voiced by Rosario Dawson, replacing the previous voice actress for Billy Lurk. I don't like this. I'm going to make this complaint. A couple of the characters have been completely recast in this game. I don't like that. Every character in the first game, I liked the casting, and I don't understand why they recast them. I know people are going to say, oh, it's because they wanted an older voice actor or whatever. Most voice actors can play older versions of characters. I think that has been made very abundantly clear in recent years with certain people and actors being able to play characters years apart. My favorite example is the voice actor for Leon Kennedy in the remake games. He can play him as a young, plucky rookie cop, a slightly older, more mature character, and an old fucking man. Actors have range, let them use it. But anyway, for this final mission, we now get to head back to Dunwall, and man, I love this level. The atmosphere it exudes is fully back, and to me, this is my favorite level just due to how oppressive and honestly depressing it is. It genuinely feels like we're back in the first game. You see all these hanging bodies everywhere of the workers and servants, the hundreds of overseers who have been killed by the witches scattered throughout. We just see the sheer damage that Delilah and her coup has caused upon the Empire right here. As when we left Dunwall, it still looked somewhat civilized, but now it is an absolute shithole, and I absolutely adore it, as it just shows the difference in what Dunwall offers compared to the rest of the game, in my opinion. But we slowly make our way through fighting or sneaking our way past a bunch of dogs and other natural enemies like these witch roots, and we can find many references and mentions of characters from the first game and what happened to them. Now this is kind of a problem because it canonizes a certain path within the first game, and choices and the differences in outcome of that game was a big strength of it, so canonizing a certain route of it is kind of an issue because it means that certain people's playthroughs won't make any sense for this game. But hey, Delilah's here and you could have just killed her in the DLC. But you just do see how far Dunwall has fallen in the short time that Delilah has taken to the throne, with many wealthy families and people having fallen as well, such as the Boyle estate they're building here being completely ransacked by the Hatter gang. But of course as well, we can find another outsider shrine.
Welcome home, Your Majesty. Delilah's waiting for you. She's been sleeping badly for the last couple of weeks, because that piece of her you were carrying around has been calling out, begging her to take it back. She feels the same craving, but she'll fight to the death to stop you from putting her spirit back where it belongs. You were careful in Karnaca. Let's see how that serves you in the tower where you were born. Delilah's got the throne, and she's got your father. But now, she's got a secret as well.
And he questions how we are going to act against Delilah. What will our actions cause, and have we thought about if we should or should not kill her due to what has happened to her? Now, I don't know, man. Delilah does seem a bit crazy and not in the good kind of way. She just seems like she's a bit of a vengeance streak against Jessamine for no real reason other than she feels like she's entitled to take the throne. And clearly, she's being a bit oppressive to the general population. But now making our way through the streets and through some guard posts, we actually enter the royal grounds, the outside part of Dunwall Tower, which is infested with witches. But also you can find Jessamine's gravestone, which you can pay respects to if you want. But now actually infiltrating the tower, we have to navigate our way up it and find Delilah in the throne room, and we can either take her out non-lethally or lethally. If you want to do it non-lethally, you'll have to craft a corrupted rune following the instructions found within the Overseer's office, and use this corrupted rune by placing it on the throne. And once giving Delilah her mortality back, she flees into her painting world. Following her through, if you knock her out, we can take her out and place her on the false throne, and trapping her within the corrupted rune or the painting world that she linked to it, breaking her plan and throwing a wrench in it, tricking her into believing she's actually ruling over the real world. But at this point in the game, depending on your choice, the game will split into one of its fucking 20 or 30 different combination endings. I think there's way more than that, which all of these endings reflect the different actions that you took within each level. But for me, I would say there is 3 main endings, like core endings. You have low chaos, high chaos, and like an absolute chaos ending for each character. Each character, Emily and Corvo, at the end of the game in low chaos will save the other from being imprisoned in stone, and Emily will either return to the throne or Corvo will help her return to the throne, restoring some level of civility to the Empire. Or in high chaos, you can do the same thing of letting them out of the stone, or you can keep them in the stone for a different variation on the ending, which reflects a more ruthless ending to the game where Corvo or Emily believes that maybe the familial connection they share with each other is a weakness, and having them imprisoned means that they have no weakness, creating either Emily the Butcher or Corvo the Black. Honestly, the thing I really do like about this game is that each action throughout the entire game does affect the ending. Each way you deal with each situation completely changes the ending entirely, and certain characters, their endings change completely depending on how you either kill or spare other characters. So for me, for my first playthrough, I did a full low chaos run. I spared every target. I knocked out all of them or gave them their non-lethal elimination method, which I view as the canon ending, and it is a more hopeful ending, and there's more, and the Empire is restored to peace. But then in New Game Plus, I did an absolute chaos run, creating as much chaos as possible, and got the Corvo the Black ending. And the endings do completely change entirely depending on what you do, and I think that is a great thing that Dishonored 2 does. But I feel like the endings in a game especially like this, they just feel very meh. I wanted to make this complaint in Dishonored 1 as well, that the endings almost feel like an afterthought because they're the exact same style. These like images that with the camera flowing through describing what happened after the events of the game. It's cool to see your actions actually take place, but I kind of wish the game had more of a definitive ending in place that was actually showing truly what changes, not just telling us the events and where these characters end up. But also at the end of the game, I did realize like, oh shit, there is another protagonist in the game that was trapped the entire time, and I completely forgot Corvo was in the game. Like, man, the game would have really benefited from having that other character, I think, because it really did need it. Especially with making the player think about their actions, you know, have Corvo question Emily and what she's doing within the levels, if it's worth killing all these people, or have Emily change entirely depending on how Corvo approaches the levels. But actually finishing Dishonored 2 for the first and second time, what did I think of the game? Well, I'm really conflicted about the game overall. First of all, I really enjoyed the game from start to finish in both stealth and a more combat-focused playstyle. I found a lot of the new tools, powers, and systems introduced really helped to flesh out the gameplay and really help improve it. All the complaints I really had about the first game, where it started to begin to feel stale and repetitive, have completely been rectified and fixed within Dishonored 2. And the game is really fun to play through from beginning to end due to the sheer amount of shit that you get to play with and experiment with, both in stealth and in combat. Enemy design, enemy variety, the amount you can do within missions, how open they are, how much exploration you can do, it's all improved. Gameplay wise, it's a full-on better experience. And then you combine that with, again, a better upgrade system, bone charm systems, and a better shop system. Dishonored 2, from a gameplay standpoint, in my opinion, is what a true sequel should be within a game. It improves absolutely everything about the game and just makes it more fun to play through. Everything gameplay side is better. But I have a couple of glaring issues and problems with this game. First of all, the story. I really don't know how to explain my problem with this story, but I think the problem I have with Dishonored 2's story is it doesn't feel fresh. I think that's the best way I can simply put it. First of all, the story is basically a rehash of the first game. Person comes into picture, tries to take throne from person, the main protagonist loses someone important to them, and then they spend the entire game trying to save someone that is important to them. That is the entire plot of the first game and the second game, except the second game you play as Emily. But not only that, so many of the characters that are with us throughout the game return from the first game. You have Sokolov, you have Megan, who is Billy Lurk, Delilah is the main antagonist of the DLCs, Corvo and Emily, and the new characters that are introduced, in my opinion, either don't get enough dialogue. I think it's a really hard point to explain because even I'm struggling to really explain my issue. Dishonored 1 and Dishonored 2, the way they present things is completely different. It's fine, but to me, the way that Dishonored 2 does it, it puts significantly less emphasis on actually learning about these characters. Each of the targets within their levels, you can find notes and journals, audiographs scattered throughout that tell the story and really fill in the details. That's a good thing. It encourages you, obviously, to explore more and more, but the main problem with that, in my opinion, that you need to find all these things, is that if you do miss audiographs, journals, letters, anything, sometimes massive gaps can appear within the story and you might be confused about what's going on. Personally, I do like the story overall. I think it works fine, but I think the way it's presented is really poorly done. Dishonored 1 did it really well because you had the base story outlined like immediately to you. The Admiral, Trevor Pendleton and Martin, they would be there and they would explain what's going on. They would keep you on track, and then you could find notes, other things that would tell you things that are going on. But I just feel like Dishonored 2 really does lack that. I think it all comes down to just the fact that they don't have those characters in the game, and I think that's why a lot of people think the game has a worse story, because a lot of people do say it's probably about on par in terms of writing quality, and it probably is, but just the way it's presented makes it so much harder to follow. Like reading journals, yeah, I don't mind doing it, but it's not engaging way to do it. Audiographs are fine, but unfortunately, you know, sometimes you're just not listening. Sometimes you're too focused on what's going on. Sometimes you'll reload a save and then not replay it, or you'll just forget about it. The good thing about having characters in like a cutscene setting that talk to you is it basically forces you to listen. And that's something that I think they tried to avoid doing with Dishonored 2. They wanted to streamline the game as much as possible and just make it as fun as possible. That's good. I think that's a great thing. But it means that, in my opinion, the story then gets negatively affected by it. It's a really complex issue, I think, but I straight up think that it needed a different story entirely. And I think it needed a lot of new characters. There's almost no supporting cast in this game. There's only really Sokolov and Megan. You do have like Hypatia, who does play a little role in the story at the beginning, and then you have obviously Aramis, who joins Dreadful Whale, but there's no one else on the boat. There's no fun interactions. There's no character building and just relationship building. There's nothing like that. The entire game is just focused on the missions, and it leads to the game feeling a lot more flat. I think genuinely it's impressive how both games do completely different things, but because of how well Dishonored 1 is overall, the things that are missing in Dishonored 2, you feel them a lot more, and it seems like a bigger issue. Also, I feel like the game, honestly, I think lacks a lot of more charismatic characters. I don't really know how to explain this. Again, I like the main cast of like villains, the main targets, but like there's no Granny Rags or the Hatter Gang and its members, the Bottle Street Gang and its members, which added a lot of world building to the game. Lord Brisby and the Boyle family, you don't have any of this, but they just feel like they're not really there for that long. Combine that then again with the opening hook of the Crown Killer basically being a nothing burger, the game's story feels wildly unsatisfying. And something that I didn't even think about is that Delilah's arc in this game, her reasons for doing what she did, feels really pointless. In my opinion, Dishonored 1's DLCs are often highlighted as the best parts of the franchise. The best level designs, the best story, everything about them is great. And I agree, I really enjoy the first game's DLCs. But the problem is, the fact that they exist makes this game even worse, because Delilah is so boring in Dishonored 2 compared to the first game, in my opinion, and the game doesn't expand her lore in any meaningful way other than making her a sister to Jessamine. There's not really a reason for this story to occur other than the fact, I think the reason they pulled Delilah back instead of having a new antagonist was the creators of the game either really liked her or they believed that not a lot of people played the DLCs and thus didn't get to experience Delilah's character. I think Delilah is a great character in the first game's DLCs. I don't like her in the second game. I think she's a really bland antagonist and doesn't really fit within this game. It feels like she's been forced back into this game for no real reason other than to bring back a named character so that fans can do this funny pog face, point at the screen and go, I know that reference. I just think it really does lack, and it really does feel like the first game is being rehashed over and over again. And that's what I mean by when I thought this game had a completely different writing staff. It feels like there's just like no new creative drive or vision behind the game. Well, apparently the writing staff is basically the same, so I would put it down to probably time constraints. With how fast Dishonored 2 was made, I think the story was kept simple and they just made sure that the story was easy to follow. They didn't want to have to build up a new antagonist or bring in too many complex villains or new characters. They just kept it simple, but unfortunately, this makes the game feel less impactful. Dishonored 1, despite some people saying it's a simple story, I think it stands far above and beyond the second game's story. It is just night and day, in my opinion, the differences. But not only that, I of course mentioned my complaints about the setting. The setting is gorgeous, it visually is stunning, but to me it clashes so much with what Dishonored is about. Dunwall, in my opinion, is one of my favourite locations in gaming. It has very quickly become one of my favourite settings, but the new location of Serkonos and Karnaca, it makes me miss Dunwall that much more, and I kind of just wish they set it in Dunwall again. Dunwall is so unique because of what it makes you feel. In Karnaca and Serkonos, I never felt like I was being pressured or pushed to my limits or seeing the absolute most disgusting thing in the Empire, or I was seeing the Empire completely fall apart in front of us and seeing it decay. It just felt like to me the entire game was Emily going on a small Spanish holiday in the bright sun, not fighting her way back up from the depths of fucking disgust and the streets of Dunwall to reclaim the throne. It just felt like a small excursion and a 1 week holiday. It lacks a lot of that like miserable feeling that the first game had. I think this is what I've been really struggling with. Serkonos and Karnaca is meant to be similar. It's meant to be a city that is struggling with a bloodfly infestation, with the Duke draining all of the money out of it. Like the industries are slowly failing and people are like desperate. But it never feels like that. It always feels kind of jolly and a little bit chipper. And that's because of the visuals of the game. It is very pretty, but unfortunately there isn't that griminess, that depressing feeling. And I think that's a big issue because it leads the tone of the game to feel wildly different. And also, the people, when you first enter the first mission and people greet you, it's not like the first game where people basically tell you to fuck off and leave them alone and are very suspicious of you. They greet you and they're only suspicious of you because you're wearing a mask, nothing else. They seem fine. It seems like they're able to live somewhat happy lives, even though the Empress was just usurped from her throne and their entire city is meant to be struggling. The average person is meant to be struggling. And this is something that Dishonored 1 did so well. It used the setting to show how far Corvo had fallen. He went from the Royal Protector to the assassin that killed the Empress, hunted by the entire Empire. I just think the setting was used so effectively to tell the narrative as well and to outline more themes and really build up the world even better. And Serkonos and Karnaca doesn't do that. It doesn't feel as good and impactful to me. And another point, Dishonored 1's targets, in my opinion, were all really deep, intricate characters that linked into different themes and issues that plagued society within these times. I could talk about the Pendleton twins and their exploitation of women and the mines that they ruled over, Lady Boyle and how she was exploited, but also all the characters linked to each other in some way. The Pendleton twins to R. Pendleton. The Admiral worked under the Spy Master. The Lord Regent, the High Overseer, worked with the Overseer we worked with, Overseer Martin. Lady Boyle was in bed with the Lord Regent. All the characters were linked in some way, and the story had you go through the game finding clues, figuring out who was doing this, what they did in the assassination plot. Oh, this person's now included. Oh, they funded this, which then allowed this person to do that. It all linked together into this central story, which Corvo slowly uncovered. And Dishonored 2 does try to do this, but it's in such a simple way that it feels so boring to go through. Again, you have the initial Crown Killer opening, which then leads you to Hypatia. It feels natural, but then you find out Hypatia's actually the Crown Killer and you deal with her. But then once you do this, you find that Sokolov is being kept by Kieran Jindosh, which then leads you to him. You then
find him, deal with him, and then Sokolov guides you to Stilton's mansion. That's where you need to go, and then that leads you to the Duke, because that he's holding the immortality thing, and then from the Duke you go straight to Delilah. They're all connected, but they feel like they're connected by one thread, not by 20 different threads that connects them all. That makes it feel more like an actual group and not just a line of succession or a line of targets for us to take out. It just feels a lot less interesting, in my opinion, how we get to each point. It's just like, oh yeah, this is happening here, go there. This person's next, go to them and kill them. It's not as complex as the first game, and you never get a point where a new target just appears out of nowhere for a reason, like Lady Boyle in the first game. We learned about her financial backing of the assassination attempt. That's why we went after her. But in this game, we learn about all the targets at the beginning and then just deal with them in succession. I feel like it just falls flat, the narrative. It just doesn't really have anything new to present, and it doesn't help that none of these new characters, in my opinion, are that interesting or more interesting than the first game's targets. Combine that with the fact that I think the main antagonists of the game, the Spy Master, the High Overseer, and then the three men that we sided with, Trevor Pendleton, the Admiral, and Martin, are significantly more interesting and more deep than Delilah. Delilah is a one-note flat antagonist. She only cares about revenge. That's it. But Martin, the Admiral, and Trevor, they do all these things throughout the game. They try like sneak these things under you, make you do something for them, and they betray you. It's like actually well written. It's layered. It's like an onion, and it makes you think about the narrative, about what's going on. It's not just going through the motions, which is what Dishonored 2 feels like to me. I think personally, Delilah, while yes, they do dive into an interesting topic about her being abandoned and everything, and she could very easily be one of the better antagonists, I just find her boring. I don't think she's really suited to be the main antagonist. She was fine in the DLC with Dowd, and I think she works perfectly there, but here, for this whole game, they needed more. They needed someone like Havelock, someone like the Spy Master. They need more, in my opinion. I don't mind the story overall. I think it's fine. It makes sense. It works on paper. There's no big issues with it, but it just feels like, again, a completely different team wrote it, because the quality and the depth and how complex a story is completely different. It just feels like an entirely different story, but the story has the same narrative beats, the same things kind of happen, but it's way less complex and way less interesting. So to me, it just feels like they took the first game story, which was like this nice full meal, had all the sides with it, all the nice sauces, and they just took everything out, and all you're left with is just a plain steak that wasn't even seasoned. Yeah, it's a steak, but you ain't got anything with it. Dishonored 2 as a sequel to the first game doesn't really work, but that's because it isn't meant to be a sequel to the first game. It's more intended to be a sequel to the 2 DLCs for the first games, and even in my eyes, it fails at being a sequel for those as well, because it doesn't actually do what, in my opinion, a sequel should do story-wise. Gameplay-wise, yes, it is the best it could be. It is a straight-up level up for the series, but it doesn't actually build upon the story in a satisfying way. It undoes all of the choices you made in those DLCs and makes the story less important. It almost makes the entire DLCs feel pointless. If Death of the Outsider didn't exist, I honestly think Dishonored 2 would be seen way more negatively for this. Dowd was the main character in the DLCs, and he was an important part of the DLCs, as the DLCs dived into more complex topics of dealing with guilt and how people will try to redeem themselves after doing a bad thing, and Dowd was an extremely important part of that DLC. But also, his conflict with him and Delilah was also extremely important. The relationship between them two, their conflict, was being built up and was being seen as what the next game was going to be about. The conflict between the assassins and the witches. But Dishonored 2 basically removes all of Dowd's parts and shoves Emily into the role that Dowd played to make Delilah her main enemy, her antagonist. And again, we are removing parts of the game that made it special
and trying to almost shove completely different pegs into the wrong hole. In my opinion, a sequel like this, Dishonored 2, needs completely new setups. It needs to be something new entirely, and in my opinion, it relying on the previous games and especially its DLCs makes it weaker in my opinion. I have seen the idea that maybe it's a good thing because if you haven't played the DLCs, you will be in the exact same shoes and you will think the exact same thing that Emily was thinking when Delilah just appears out of nowhere, not knowing who she is or how she got here or what her powers are, because she's not Dowd, she's Emily. And I do think that is kind of a cool thing, but unfortunately the game just falls flat in my opinion in that regard. I don't think this game really understood what it wanted to do with this story. Dishonored 2 is a game of extremely high highs but incredibly low lows. It has some of the greatest level designs ever in games and has the potential to tell interesting and thoughtful stories within them and its world, but all of that information is hidden away within notes and audiographs that you have to do homework for, not naturally interplaced into the world to show you the state of the world and how far it's going. This is something that the first game did masterfully. It naturally showed you in the levels these things, the issues plaguing society and the opinions of its civilians, as they actually had way more lines that they would express to themselves. It has one of the most enjoyable sandboxes to tinker with and engage with, but the game struggles to question you and confront you about how you're using those powers, never truly showing the effects of your actions, with the chaos system now playing a much smaller role in shaping the world and the people around you. A game that wants you to confront topics like class divide and the abuse of power, and whether power should be earned rather than inherited, but spends surprisingly little time showing those issues to the player beyond telling you they exist. It's a game that does a lot right, but a hell of a lot of things wrong. But even with all of my complaints and issues, it's still a game that I genuinely enjoy and I would say that I loved playing. It's not a game that I adore like the first game, but I do love the game. While it's a step back in my eyes in many of the things that made the first game so special to me, it does more than enough to evolve the series mechanically and gameplay wise to be a good follow-up. The powers are better, the combat is significantly better, the stealth is wildly improved, and the level design is some of the best we've ever seen in gaming. But despite all of my praise, the game's story, in my opinion, leaves the most to be desired, not leaving any form of impact like the first game did upon me. And despite all of my issues with the stories, I still found moments where I was getting completely absorbed in the world and what was happening in it. How Aramis Stilton and the Duke used the mines to fund their wealth, the stories of Jindosh and what he did with his creations, so on and so forth. The world is interesting, but you need to do a lot of research to get to the point where you find it interesting. Dishonored 2 is a game that constantly frustrates me because I can see how close it came to being something truly special, something that could honestly surpass the original and be seen as the perfect sequel. And I know some people are going to say that that is just nostalgia talking, that I'm looking at Dishonored 1 with rose-tinted glasses. To tell you the truth, I played Dishonored 1 for the first time for my previous video. I never played Dishonored 1 before. I don't have years of memories attached to the game. I didn't play the game when I was a youngster on the 360. I played it for the first time then and fell entirely in love with Dishonored 1 and what it had to offer then. Then I played Dishonored 2 and this is my first time playing Dishonored 2. It's clear to me there is issues with this game. And honestly, I think this is why I'm so critical with it. Not because I dislike the game, but because it's following up the game that I view as perfect. A game of pure creative vision and a true embodiment of what games can be. And if you're following up what I view as perfect, being almost perfect or just good enough in aspects isn't enough. For all my issues with Dishonored 2, I do think there is a lot of heart within it and there's a lot of stories and messages within it that are trying to be told, but not so well. But what is the key idea that I do believe Dishonored 2 is trying to portray to us? The one that I think is at the heart of the game has to do with power. Just like the first game. That power alone doesn't make somebody worthy of leading someone, worthy of respect, or entitled to something. Delilah believes that she deserves the throne because she was born of royal blood and had the power to take it. The Duke believes he deserves to rule over his homeland because of his money. And depending on how you play Emily or even Corvo, you can end up believing the exact same thing, that the rule over the empire should belong to you because of the power you have. But throughout the game, I don't think that is ever really the point. The point that the game tries to make you think about is what kind of person you become with power. Anybody can inherit power, anybody can be given authority, and anybody can sit at the top of the totem pole. But that doesn't mean that they deserve to be there. And I honestly think that is what the game is trying to tell us. Make you question if you are worthy to rule and be in a position of power. Most of us are never going to be a ruler of an empire or a kingdom. Most of us are never going to sit upon a throne and have to decide the fates of millions. But every single one of us will one day have the power over something. A friend, a family member, a co-worker, a child, or someone who just trusts us. And when that moment comes, I think Dishonored asks a pretty good question. Not whether you can hold on to that power and abuse it as much as possible, not whether you can take power for yourself, but whether you've done anything to deserve it. Because at the end of the day, power doesn't define who we actually are. What we choose to do with it does. Hello lads and lasses, thank you for watching. Bit of a different video this time, I know, a bit of a different style, and it's a bit different to the first Dishonored video, but that's because I really struggled to actually make this video. I don't know, just didn't really hit me as much as the first game, I think, but I still wanted to make the video because I still think it's an interesting game to talk about. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. A bit different, a bit more rambly again. I tried to keep it unscripted a bit more, I tried not to follow a tight script, and I tried to really keep my own opinions in the video and not research too much about the game. So I hope it was somewhat enjoyable for you guys to watch. If not, let me know. Of course, a shout out to all channel members who are Justin Tyler, Gator, Darren76, It's Bert, Carter Phillips, Corrego, Zarolino, Kento, Omen the Turk, Ashley, Jen Caliber, Jamie Barrett, Juniper LP, Dan Larat, Straight Gen, Synapse, Link12, Mr. Disappear, Shaku, Yagito, Hansen, I don't know how to say that, Yavian Hammond, Corazonta, Tyler Reeves, Saint CL, Camden Shepherd, Zartane FF14, Renegade, Sailor Peach, Seren Soji, Quietus Law, King, Elite 0101, Yote Kazuki, Vracula, Benjamin Schmidt, Hayabusa, Austin Smith, and Lule. Thank you all for your support, it's greatly appreciated, and thank you for the support on the last video as well. Very personal video that was for me to make. Took a lot out of me. I know it probably doesn't seem it, but it's a lot to script a video like that and really reflect. So yeah, but yeah, 2 years now, it's kind of crazy. And thank you all for the last 2 years. It's been a massive pleasure, and I'm so grateful for all the support I've been getting recently. The next video will be a bit different. It's going to be Far Cry 5, and I'm going to do more, I don't know, I'm going to script it a bit different, I think, try to structure it a bit different to my traditional videos, because Far Cry 5 is an open-ended game. You can do it in whatever order. And I want to have a bit of fun because I think the story and the messages within that game are very interesting to talk about. And also going to get very religious, of course. But after that, I'm not decided what I'm doing. Don't know. Might do something shorter. I really want to do a shorter game. I don't want these videos to keep being 2-3 hours long. Yeah, that's all I've got to say. That's entirely enough waffling from me. See you around. Crocodile.